The meeting to order. Kathy, will you do a roll call, please?
Katrina Byers.
Here.
AJ Hobbs.
Here.
Ben Baumfock.
Here.
Frosty Marriott. Dan Richardson.
Here.
Marty Silverstein.
Here.
Okay, looks like we have a quorum and we're ready to go. So on the consent agenda, we have a bunch of items. I'll read them quickly just for the general public. Accounts payable, board minutes, code of conduct, resolution 10 amending appendix A in the municipal code, license agreement for the Tick Ridge Tower site, liquor license renewal for Carbondale Beer Works, liquor license renewal for Ming's Cafe, designating Garfield County Clerk as the agent for the November election, and ordinance 14 extending the deadline for the city market recordation. Would anyone like to pull anything off the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull F, Code of Conduct, please.
Pulling F, Code of Conduct. Anything else? Okay. Let's just go ahead and discuss the Code of Conduct.
Okay.
Easier said than done, right? Like, what page is that on?
Was it F?
Yeah. Do you have
D,
Oh.
page 32.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Did you, so, I'm sorry, did you mean the D?
No, I'm sorry. I did mean the Code of Conduct, which
Okay,
is
D.
D. I think I just put, my notes got crossed. So on the bottom of page 30, let's see, is that 32 of 264, we have the points agreed on by the Board of Trustees during our good governance meeting, and I just wanted to state again that I feel that number 2, trustees who wish to add an item to the agenda have to have agreement from at least 2 other trustees. A written summary of the item and the requested action from the board will be provided to staff by the cutoff date for setting the agenda in order to be included on the agenda. I think the summary is, totally reasonable, and I think helpful to for staff to know which direction to sort of give background on. But I think my experience is as a minority on this board, and I think having to have 2 additional people to bring a conversation forward feels onerous to me. And I will pass this on the consent agenda with that in there, but I stated it in that meeting, and I just wanted to reinforce that I think that that's onerous to be able to bring a topic of conversation forward.
Any other thoughts on that?
Would you prefer that there was not a requirement for any other trustees or just one trustee?
I think 1 is okay, to at least be able to be heard out. I mean, I think that's how it was before. I'm not sure. Do you remember, Jay?
We were at our previous operating agreement. It wasn't really in this form of a code of conduct. Was 2, and I think the theory was that you could bring it up under persons present. Not persons present, under trustee comments. I'd like to add this agenda item, and the majority thought that 3 would be a good trigger point. But, it was 2 before.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would offer us to discuss it, but we already did have this discussion, so that's why I'm saying if nobody has big issues with it, I appreciate you bringing this up, and we'll, if there's no other comments, we'll just go from there.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, and that includes all the items on the consent agenda? Okay. Moved by Katrina, seconded by Ben, I think.
Yep.
Any further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Item number 3, persons present not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to address the board on something that is not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to trustee comments. AJ?
I have a couple comments in regards to Mountain Fair. I fully supported the cups, and I still do. However, there still was a lot of one-time use cups, and I do know that I'm going to talk to Carbondale Arts about this because they're the ultimate governing body, but if we're going to continue to financially support reusable cups, then I think we need to get to a point where there are 0 disposable cups. But I'm still glad we did that, and thank you for bringing that up. And then one thing that I regret doing, 2 Mountain Fairs ago, I brought up closing Main Street for the duration of Mountain Fair. And I wish I would have brought this to the attention of a new board and new times, because to me it's unacceptable to have Main Street open during Mountain Fair. Too many people, too much traffic. I think the cons and negatives that were talked about with closing Main Street are not nearly as bad as we think they would be, and not nearly as important as safety and fluidity of the fair. So I won't be here next year, but I hope that maybe that creeps its way in.
It sure was fun when it used to be open. Go ahead, Marty.
I'd like to just make a comment about that. CCAH used to have crossing guards on Main Street. That kind of helped, I think, control the traffic. Gene would know better than me, and they haven't had them for the last several years. So maybe they should think about going back to having volunteers doing the crossing guards, slowing down the traffic on Main Street, letting the pedestrians cross. And I don't know why they stopped that, but they did that for many, many years.
They did it for staffing. They weren't able to get volunteers that would staff it. And that was the reason that they
Stopped.
no longer do it.
Did that help, in your opinion?
Yeah, it helped for people crossing at the intersections. Definitely.
Okay. AJ, did you have any more comments? No. Okay. Anybody else? Ben?
I'd just like to update the board. At the last meeting, I guess it was the last meeting, seems like a while back, we discussed just pursuing a conversation about lighting along major pedestrian corridors in town, partly in response to the 2 recent assaults that both happened late at night on pedestrians. And I think it just might be a good conversation to have regardless of those 2 incidents. And so just to update you on sort of where that is, I've talked to the Bike, Ped, and Trails Commission, which I'm our liaison to, and we're going to talk about that at their September meeting, which is their next meeting. I'll also just mention it at least at the RAFTA board meeting that I'm attending on Thursday, not to make it an agenda item, but just to let them know that all we're doing at this point is starting a conversation. We're not proposing any specific solution. I've met with Larry Ballinger, and he is going to prepare some information for that Bike Ped Trails Commission meeting, really about the type of lighting we used along the west side of 133, along the new bike path there, where City Market's going to be, and whether that would be appropriate and acceptable to the neighbors and to the general public along any corridors in town. And I think we'll probably focus on the Rio Grande Trail, which is why RAFTA would be a player in that. And I had a really good conversation with Gene today, and I appreciate him getting right back to me when I asked a couple questions about the exact locations of those 2 assaults and for some details. Ultimately, neither one happened on the Rio Grande Trail, but I think as a starting point to start talking about lighting, we can say, well, is there anywhere in town that needs more lighting for pedestrian safety at night? That's a pretty obvious dark spot. Even though neither of those happened there, I think it's still worth pursuing. So I just wanted to update the board on that and see if there's any questions or redirections. That'll probably be coming back to us at some point. It'll be a little while, I would imagine, before everybody has their say, or if Gene wanted to add anything about the nature of those assaults or anything like that.
I appreciate you bringing in Larry and Gene so that discussion can be as productive as possible. So, thank you.
No, that was somebody else. I had wanted to say, that, when we had the discussion about lighting on the along the when we did the new highway construction, we had some pretty good discussions about what was appropriate out there, and it's obviously a fine line between do we throw more light into the night sky or what is the safety ramifications of this. So the only thing that we did have these discussions in pretty much detail, as I remember when we were going forward with that part of the bike path. I do know that we are throwing off a lot more light in the night sky than we used to. And of course, we want everybody to be safe, but we also want common sense solutions too, like, you know, walking with someone else or whatever on other things. So I think it's more than just lighting, more than on safety issues. So there's a balance there that we need to be aware of. And so I would suggest that the board also be brought into this from a lighting pollution standpoint. If we're going to have that discussion. And then bikes and ped, I know everybody saw the email from Lori Loeb about what she called them, I can't remember the term, outlaw cyclist and
Rogue or outlaw, I'm not sure.
rogue outlaw bikers or something, I don't know, whatever she said, but it points to the need to not only talk about lighting at bike and ped, but the issue that I brought up with, that Gene had brought forth an ordinance to bike and ped, and they seemed to resist it, and it got put on the back burner, and we continue to have issues with bikers that aren't following our rules. So if we're going to talk about lighting at bike and ped, I really want them to talk about Gene's ordinance that he brought forward and the roundabout issues, and following the laws we have on the books now for cyclists.
Great. And that is on their agenda as well. for
Great,
that
thanks.
meeting. So that was the one item already on the agenda. And I
Okay.
agree, it makes a good kind of more robust discussion, because I totally agree. Lighting things up isn't going to solve problems, and nothing we do is going to solve all these problems. But I just think it's a conversation
Yeah.
worth having, and maybe we can reference some of the work that was done before. And I did clarify with Larry that all the lighting that's been added along the west side of 133, which he's saying is working well, is all dark skies compliant, and it's real directional LED stuff. So I think that'll be part of the conversation as well. It's got to be highly energy efficient as well as directional and not going up into the atmosphere. So anyway, I'll just continue that discussion with those
Great,
groups
thanks.
unless it's a dead end road here already. But if you guys would like to see that as it progresses, we'll.
I think we kind of agreed to that last meeting, so I think that's great. Frost, did you have anything else?
No, that was.
Katrina?
Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for taking it to bike and ped. And I did speak offline to Brent at Rio Grande, and they said that they're looking at moving forward on doing some lighting. It's an aspect of a really long range view plan, very expensive project, but taken recent events, they are interested in moving forward, and I would be interested in partnering with them on that. On Saturday night, July 30th, I participated in a walk down the Rio Grande Trail, starting where the assault took place, and down the trail all the way to the town hall, which is completely black. The entire trail is. In that time period, I also heard about a head-on bike collision that took place at night because it was dark and they didn't have front lighting, and those people were injured. But I think it isn't always an option for people to walk with someone else, and this is a corridor that connects our public transportation system to our downtown, and we do have to collaborate with RAFTA on the lighting in their corridor, which I think they're open to. But on the lighting where this assault took place, this is on our property, and I think it's our responsibility. So I'd like to talk about it at greater detail, not only the lighting issue, and during our conversations about lighting out there, I spoke extensively for the Dark Sky Initiative, and also extensively in our UDC to ensure that none of the lights that we have in our community contribute to night wash. And also there are some lights that are still not in compliance that little by little I think are coming into compliance, like the ones over at City Market for a long time were angled the wrong direction. So it's something we need to be aware of, because we do want to maintain the sort of wild mountain integrity of our starry skies. But I think where it comes to human safety, it's an immediate and to me very alarming priority. And I think lighting, as Frosty said, is only one aspect to the solution, but I think it's very important that this come forward as a key community issue. Jean can speak to the prevalence of this kind of crime, and this kind of crime contributes to other serious problems in our community as well. And I think, unfortunately, there's a cultural tolerance in the United States for crimes against women. some of the worst human rights violations in the world are crimes against women in the United States, according to the UN, and that is real in our own community. And I would really love to see us take a step forward and have zero tolerance for this type of crime. I know our police department has been working really hard on this case. I would love to now and in the future help support the police department in whatever way we can, and I think one way that we can is to talk about expanding the police force a little bit under Jean's direction. I think we talked about an investigator unit, but I think there might be some other needs in the police department as well. But I really want to have a public safety plan. Like, I kind of don't want this to just continue. And I think it has, because it's such a complex problem to solve. But I think putting our attention onto it, and the victim of the most recent crime making herself public and speaking out against it, I think was a profound act of courage, and I think speaks to the significance of us intervening. So I really appreciate the work that you've done on it already, and I would like us in budget talks to discuss allocating funds to complete the lighting in that area. And I also spoke with Jean about working with the police department to identify dark areas in town that we know are problems because crimes are committed in those areas, and to move forward in mitigating that with sensitivity to lights shining in windows and lights shining in the sky. I think we can have safe community lighting that doesn't have a negative environmental or social impact, but just increases the safety of our whole community.
Thank you, Katrina. Just to be clear, this is what I have in my mind, and the board can correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the direction that we gave to bike, ped, and trails was to look at improving safety, and lighting might be part of that. It might not be. It probably is. But just to be clear, I mean, it seems like safety is the priority, and lighting might be a solution, but that's kind of what we're, okay. Because I think your point is well taken, and I don't want the safety aspect to get lost in the lighting discussion.
No,
It's
yeah,
about safety.
exactly.
Okay. Good. Anything else?
No, but I don't know if this is a part of what Ben was looking for or not, but I would like to have a public safety discussion on a future agenda to see what kind of steps we can take as a community to prevent and help mitigate this kind of crime.
Okay. That was a request. Anybody else willing to put that on an agenda item?
Yep.
Okay. Let's do that.
Thank you.
So Katrina, I'm not sure, like that's kind of a big, huge topic. You mentioned a safety plan. So this is one where, where that summary is going to be really important. So we can talk about that offline, but framing that discussion and putting some parameters around it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that I would request Jean to give feedback on, and maybe the schools too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan.
Yeah.
So, it just to make, I still am not feeling like our community is as unsafe as you are. In fact, and maybe it's because I'm a man, or maybe but I have a daughter that's 22, and she doesn't walk anywhere after dark without somebody walking with her. So I know people can try to do that. I don't have that feeling that where our crime rate is higher than any other town comparable size. And so I'd like to have something that points in that direction. If Jean has found that out, then I'd like to hear that from Jean. I do know that the two, at least there's two people under investigation for the latest assault, and their DNA has been sent to an expedited turnaround that takes 6 weeks. So our police force, my understanding is, has brought forward two suspects, one of which I don't think spoke English, and I'm not sure about the other one, but we're not waiting on our police department on this. We're waiting on DNA analysis that takes 6 weeks, expedited. So I think we need to be careful in just alarming the public that this is somehow an unsafe community, because I don't feel that. Personally.
And just to clarify why I support putting it on the agenda, Frosty, because I agree with everything you said. And I don't mean to imply that the community isn't safe or that the police could be doing more than they already are. But I think discussing that, and partly because it's a new board, we've never discussed safety. I think it's worth discussing, and we might come back and say, you know what, we're doing a lot of great things, and maybe we just tweak it by adding some lighting or things, or maybe not. So I think it's worth a discussion, but I agree that it's not to say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. It's just to revisit safety. So, Marty.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to have this discussion, and we are going to have it, I'd like to have it framed in terms of numbers of how many assaults last year or the year before, how many in comparison, say, to comparable sized town, like say maybe Basalt, so that we have some idea where we're at. I understand the severity and, the importance of the most current acts, but I'd like to get a longer term perspective.
Well, let's take that. I mean, there's work to be done to frame this discussion, and let's take that offline, because I think there's work to be
that's
done.
fine.
Anything else other than this discussion?
Yeah, I think it's really important because I was trying to find the press release, but I'm pretty sure it said that women should not walk alone at night and are advised to carry mace. Is that what it said?
No.
No, there was a news release that said that. Can you clarify some of these
Our
questions?
press release did not say anything about mace.
Okay. That I think had come through I think I had heard that through the news, so.
I don't believe that was in the newspaper article either. Our recommendation is that if women or anybody else is out at night, that they should be with a partner. It's kind of like car break-ins. We recommend that people lock their cars, but they still aren't locking their cars. But we would recommend that people women specifically, try and be with a partner or stay in the lighted areas of town. It's just a safety thing. I don't want to get too much into this discussion right now, but it's really not that we are an unsafe community. We did stats today from January 1 of 2014 to current. We have really only had 2 assaults that were unknown suspects in that time period. We've had some that were known suspects. We've had some in residences. We had one where a younger female got on friends on a guy with Facebook, and he ended up forcing her to have sex. Not very much force, but some force. And we did search warrants and couldn't find his Facebook profile. So that's still an open case. So if you take those, that's 3 in that time period, which is about 2 2/3 years. So we don't have a sexual assault with people being out in the public and it being an unknown suspect. We've had 3 over a 3-year period, and really, or 2 2/3 years period, and really only 2. So it's not a problem. But we can always try and improve safety with lighting and whatever, and we just need to look at it as a comprehensive thing, whether it's staffing, lighting, better equipment, whatever it is. I think we need to have this discussion. One of the things I will say that I did in the research today is I took the statistics that have been reported to the SBI. It's called Uniform Crime Reports, and there's a company that did like safety studies in Colorado for towns or where they rank as being safe. Basalt ranked 21, Carbondale ranked 24, and we're both kind of close. Delta, which is a population about ours, was around 65. So, in that case, we're doing pretty good. Of course, it took all demographic sizes. It included places like Denver and Pueblo. But we're still doing pretty good at that, and it has per capita and all that kind of stuff. But Basalt's 21, we're 24. I think we're pretty reasonable. I think Glenwood was down in the 60s also for theirs. So that made me feel pretty good that we were in that area.
Thank you, Gene. And we'll definitely dive more into that when we put this on the agenda. And I don't mean to stifle the conversation, but clearly there's a bigger discussion to have.
Yes.
So thank you for coming and
Thank you.
being prepared with those stats.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, AJ.
One other comment. The e-board is currently doing some research on the potential of doing a plastic bag and single plastic bottle use ban of some sort or limitization. And one of the e-board members, Patrick Hunter, asked if the Board of Trustees would be willing to approve the legal advice from Mark, which would require some spending. And I wasn't able to talk to him in person, so I couldn't figure out exactly how much time or cost it would be. I don't know if he talked to you at all, Jay?
Yeah, I think, I didn't talk just via email, but I think the intent was to try to get some research on some of the legal parameters on both those topics, and some of the issues going further. He had asked, at the staff level, us to move forward on that, and, I declined until there was, usually careful not to direct Mark unless it's a topic that the board would like to have further explored. I know the board on numerous occasions has indicated a desire to look at those two topics, but we haven't discussed whether to allocate. I'm thinking we're looking at an hour or two, not a lot of time on this, but just wanted to make sure you were all on board with taking it a little bit further for some research before. I think the e-board wanted to have some parameters to work with before they were out there pumping ideas in the community.
Anybody oppose that idea? Okay. Sounds like it.
I mean, I actually would, is that something that this board is interested in doing, is pursuing a ban on water bottles and bags? Because I don't think we should tell them to go forward unless that's something that we want to do.
I don't think I can answer that right now, but I think if a committee is asking us to see if it's legal or not to explore it, I'm willing to vote, a few $100 to know if it's even legal. But it gives me pause, and I'm not willing to, answer that right now.
Yeah, I can't say that I would definitely support it. I'd have to look at all the details, and I'm not really sure either. I'd be open-minded to it.
I guess I'm asking because we have advisory boards and we do tend to give them some direction of what we'd like them to be looking at, and so I'm just not sure if this is,
I think this is consistent with what the town board, previous board reviewed with the e-board during their work session. This was on the work plan for the year, but we didn't talk about allocating any legal research towards it. But I do think it aligns with the work plan that was approved.
Thank you. Okay, I just have a few. A couple days before Mountain Fair, I attended an editorial meeting with Zane and Jason Sewell down at the Grand Junction Sentinel regarding the Thompson Divide, and it was incredibly interesting. Zane just has such a command of the issues, so I learned a lot, and I haven't heard anything about an editorial they wrote, but certainly the EPA's decision is certainly favorable, and that was good. Kudos to all of those that put time and effort into Mountain Fair. I think it was a huge success, as always, and just a ton of fun. It seemed bigger than usual, so the fact that there weren't many issues was promising, because there just seemed to be a lot of people. I also sent out forwarded an email from Coperg about whether or not the board would consider signing on to their letter to the state of Colorado, respectfully asking that carbon emissions be considered in their transportation plan. Everybody had a chance to think about that? Anybody oppose that idea of us just endorsing that letter?
I support that.
Okay, great. Okay, that's all I had. Yes.
Dan, on the BLM EIS, the draft, or
Sorry, BL.
the issued EIS prior to the record of decision, there's a hard copy at the front counter at Town Hall for anyone who'd like to peruse that. There's also a CD for those of you who want to make a copy, but it's multiple volumes.
So it sounds like there's a 30-day public comment period, and then the BLM will finalize it?
Then there's a record of decision
Record
from
of decision.
the BLM after that period.
Okay. All right, thank you. Allison, any comments?
No comments.
No comments. Okay, moving on to item number 6, special event liquor license for Festival Las Americas. Any introduction, Kathy? Or? No? Okay, all
I
right.
let them take care of it.
All right, and we have to, just for the record, if you state your name and address, and that would be,
Jen Quevedo.
thank you.
I'm the president of Club Rotario.
That's,
Physical address, mailing address?
Kathy, do we need that if they're on the
I
agenda?
don't need it for this,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
All right. Go for it.
Okay. Well, we submitted an application for the use of the park for our 15th anniversary of Festivales Americas. And I just wanted to show up. I haven't done this before. Usually Julian Harnaker takes
Okay.
care of this piece, so I'm not sure what it is you guys need from me.
Usually it's unless there's questions, it's an opportunity for you to promote your event and let everybody
Okay.
know about it, but also if there's anything unique. But for the most part, staff provides us the key information, and like I said, unless there's questions, it's kind of an easy procedure. But
Okay.
if you just want to highlight when the event is and
Yeah, our event, this is going to be the 15th anniversary, and it's Festivales Americas, so it's a celebration of Latino culture and Anglo culture sort of melding together. It's going to be on the 28th of August here at Sopris Park from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're having some big name bands this time around, trying to attract more people. We're really excited about the efforts that we've put into it to get it organized.
I appreciate your efforts. Any questions of Jen?
Is there kid stuff too?
Yes, we're gonna have bouncy castles and face painting, and there's also a magic show. Gem and Jim, I think he was in Strawberry Days, and I think he did Mountain Fair too. So he's gonna come to our event and put on a show for the little ones.
Cool. I just wanted to say it's one of my favorite events that Carbondale does, and is, I think, really beautifully culturally rich, and I go every year, and I hope it's a huge success. So thanks for
I
being
hope
here.
everybody comes.
All right. And again, it's on August 28th.
It is August 28th at 11 a.m.
Okay. AJ.
Will there be a cover charge this year?
Yes, we're charging $10 for adults at the gate, and then if the for the bouncy castles, it's sort of a sliding scale, and depending on how long they're going to play, and we're still trying to at least work out the details on the little kids area. But as far as the adults, we are charging a gate fee.
I know past boards, there were some members who were very strongly against having a cover charge for a public space. I'm caught in the middle because it is a fundraiser for scholarships. The one thing that I struggle with is it's a predominantly Latin event with Latin culture, and it's tough in my mind to have something that's like Mountain Fair where it's free of charge for people to come in, and then an event that mostly Latino people come to and there's a cover charge. So maybe I'll talk to you offline about creative ways we can find some fundraising otherwise, or
Sure. I mean, we've,
Or is that even an
several
issue
years
with
ago, we
people?
had it to where we didn't have a gate charge, and that was just implemented a couple years to now. And it's, I guess we're not really excited about the idea of charging for the gate. But because we're such a small club, and this takes such an enormous amount of money really to put on, it's been hard to, I guess, surrender that piece of the fundraisers, because we make probably about 6 or 7 scholarships just off the gate charge.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Has there even been, maybe it's not even a problem, have there been negative comments from guests about it, or?
No, not really. I mean, in the whole, like during the entire day, we might have maybe 1 or 2 people of the 1 to 2,000 people that would show up that might complain or even bulk, but mostly they're happy to pay because they know that it's a fundraiser, and they know that the money that they are paying is going towards the greater cause of sending their kids to college.
Okay, that's good to hear. So sounds like it's a non-issue.
That's a good point, though. Any other comments, questions?
I just wanted to say I think the cover charge is super worth it, and we do have other fundraisers around town like Cowboy Up and other things that are able to benefit from public space to help their causes and nonprofits, and it's a really cool thing. I've always found it was really worth the charge, especially what most events cost in the world these days. It's pretty cheap, so I think it's a good thing. Also, we have a nonprofit grant application to the town of Carbondale, and we allocate grant funds every year, and maybe it'd be worth filling out one of those too.
Okay, thank you.
Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the liquor license for Festival Las Americanas.
Second.
Seconded by Katrina, motion by AJ. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, good luck with your event. Thank you for
Thanks
coming,
so
Jen.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is a special event liquor license for the 5 Point Film Festival.
She said she'd get here at 6:45, but you guys are ahead of schedule, so.
Okay, usually we're a lot ahead of schedule, but does anybody have any comments or questions or concerns about this one?
Did we skip Alliance Earth?
Yep.
We did.
Maybe we should do that one and then she'll be here.
Okay, we'll stay on track. Sorry, I was getting a little carried away. Special event liquor license for Alliance Earth. Yeah. Lewis, right?
Lewis Beck, yes.
So Lewis, you kind of heard the drill. If there's anything you want to tell us about the event, but otherwise the staff has provided us most of the details.
Sure. I don't know how familiar any of you are with Alliance Earth. It's a 501c that is registered in Basalt. The director is Jeffrey Barbie, grew up in this valley. I grew up in this valley. He is a award-winning documentary filmmaker. A couple weeks ago at the 3rd Street Center, we put on a showing of his documentary called The High Price of Cheap Gas that compared the fracking industry in Rulis and Rifle area to South Africa, where he lives now. It's an award-winning film. He also broke a story called Black Mamba's Power of Women for Rhinos, talking about these all-female anti-poaching troops in South Africa. And Mount Mabu, which is a mountain in Mozambique that he documented a expedition through, where they found over 50 undiscovered species of plants and animals, and we're specifically trying to raise funds to do another documentary of that area, Mount Mabu. So I am a producer of comedy shows. I'm doing one over here in Marble on Marble Distillery on Saturday. I've done a number of them there, as well as Aspen and Denver. I think it's a great event in a lot of ways. I'm going to be bringing in really high-quality comedians. There's a really big film comedy festival in Denver the following week, so I'm getting sort of coattailing that event to get some of their out-of-town comedians to come up here beforehand. They're fully professional and will be paid for the event. The funds then, of course, will go to Alliance Earth 100% to cover this expedition we talked about. So I think it's a good event and high-quality event for Carbondale and a good cause to be promoting.
Sounds like it. And Lewis, is this your first event in Carbondale?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with regulations and laws of and what you'll have to do to comply and stuff?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
I have, yeah. I mean, I did get I've hired a bartender. I've got her tip certificate here to make sure that that's taken care of, and it's going to be a 21 and over event.
Okay.
We will be carding at the door and putting on wristbands out.
All right. Any other questions of Lewis? Okay. It's interesting. And again, August 20th at the launch pad?
Correct.
All right. What time?
So the comedy show and that event is going to start at 7. At 8. We're going to open the doors at 7. We're actually going to open ahead of time with no alcohol sales to do some meet and greet with Jeffrey Barbie, who will be back in town, and he'll be talking about some of his projects with people that are interested. He's worked quite a bit with the Thompson Divide Coalition people as well, and just promoting all of their efforts generally for environmental movements.
Okay. I would entertain a motion. on this one?
Make a motion to approve the liquor license for Alliance Earth on August 20th at the launch pad.
Second.
Seconded by Marty. Any further questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Thank you, Louis.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
For the event.
Thanks.
Now it's time for the 5 Point Film Festival. Okay.
Still not here.
But if nobody has any questions or concerns, I think we could move forward with it.
So they did this last year, and really nothing has changed. I think they have a pretty oiled machine going on now as far as special events go.
Yep.
They're just showing a movie out back and serving some wine and beer, probably.
Behind 3rd Street at Bonnie Fisher, right?
Yep.
3rd Street Center.
Mhm.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the liquor license for the 5 Point Film Festival on September 15th at the 3rd Street Center.
Second.
Seconded by Marty. Comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Thank you. Ben, now you have me nervous. I gotta double check what I'm doing next. Okay, item number 9, public hearing, modification of premises for WineTime. Sigrid, good to see you.
Hi, Sigrid Piper.
So staff has provided us the information and the drawings, but if there's anything you would like to say or introduce your project?
Yeah, I mean, we're very excited. I was here about 7.5 years ago, highly pregnant, when we applied for a first liquor license. And now 7.5 years later, we made it through the difficult times, and we've been growing very fast. And so we've urged our landlord to give us more room. And so the carniceria is moving over 2 spaces down. And so they're not lost, they're still modifying, and we're just breaking through the wall and extending our store by another almost 1,700 feet. So we're very excited about that growth potential there. So.
Well, congratulations. That's
Thank
the kind
you.
of economic development that is just great. Local
Yeah.
business just getting bigger. So
Yeah,
thank you
I
for your
think so
efforts
too.
making that happen.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Sigrid? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the change to WineTime.
Okay. Is there-
Second.
Seconded by Katrina. Further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Good luck.
you. That was very
Thanks, good luck.
Okay, item number 10, amendments to marijuana regulations.
Well, let's try and keep the momentum.
Yeah, I think it's about to get
This is
challenging.
nasty stuff, you guys, and it's really complicated for me, which means it has to be complicated for at least some of you. I think, on reflection, why there's so much here and what we're trying to do is a result of recent recodification of the code in Muni Code. Recodification of what was Title 17?
And 18.
And 18 into the UDC, and the fact that I am on an impending leave come September, and Mark, the town attorney, is not as well versed as he might like to be on marijuana. So, which he's the smartest guy, he'll come right up to speed, I have no doubt. But why you have so much before you is a result of those 3 things. And the way we should tackle this tonight is by exhibit by exhibit. The first exhibit concerns the follow-up discussion on concentration of marijuana impacts, which is a discussion we've been having now with this board for now the 3rd meeting. It was previously discussed by the former Board of Trustees or certain members earlier this year. And hopefully we can get some resolution and make some decisions on the 3 remaining concentration of impacts kind of subject matter, and move forward, give staff some direction so that we can paper this this week. the second exhibit, well, why don't we just go exhibit by exhibit? And I won't even introduce the others. So let's just jump right in. Exhibit A. You all had, at your last meeting, adopted an ordinance that addressed concentration of impacts by, let's see, setting a cap for certain marijuana establishments, 3 for cultivation, 5 for others. You all had, let's see, added additional review criteria that the board could consider but was not required to consider. And let's see, there was one more thing that you all had done. I guess that's all we did. We had not gained total consensus on how to or whether to require additional spacing limitations between certain marijuana facilities. What has been thrown out there and what we've kind of developed in mapping tonight is a 400-foot spacing limitation between any new facility and whatever's existing, excepting from both sides of that testing facilities. And that is made a little bit more complicated by the additional 500-foot spacing limitations from schools, daycare facilities, and drug and alcohol treatment centers. So what John has mapped may give you a sense of where you want to go tonight. And maybe we'll just pause here and I won't keep going while we talk about spacing restrictions.
So right now, currently, this is Buggy Circle here. You've got a facility at this location in this lot, facility at this lot, facility at this lot, then you've got numerous ones in this building here, and then several in these buildings, or the condominium units over here. And all of that, this entire block, is about 700 feet. So I can kind of give you a perspective on, 400-foot spacing or anything else between any other types of facilities. And also remember that along Main Street here, it takes a little bit to catch up. Within the block from Snowmass to, I believe it's 4th, is 400-foot spacing between the 7th, is 400-foot spacing for dispensaries and retail shops. So your 400-foot is essentially one of the blocks, the city block along that that stretch right there.
So what is that? John, have you looked at it in depth enough to know, if we were to applications or what are the cliff notes of the impacts of this?
Essentially, the majority of the businesses we have now would be grandfathered in. So that would leave everything over here on Buggy in place, but it would also force most of it back into either this location here, where Ross used to be, because that's all industrial. There is a daycare center located here. So you've got 500 feet by direct pedestrian access. So that would actually be, you'd start out, walking along here, and once you actually got to, that's 484 feet there. So essentially only this northern, or actually eastern section here would allow any type of facility to go into it. And then you also have a facility going in over here in ET Plaza, and a facility that is not in operation here at the TJ Concrete building. We're going to meet with them tomorrow to see about moving their location. But that really would, yes and no, stick it in certain areas. But you also have your 500-foot by direct pedestrian access from schools, daycare centers, drug and alcohol treatment centers. And a lot of that just depends on exactly where the location's going to be. We don't have the buffers anymore, which kind of opens things up a lot. But primarily what it comes down to is, well, who's willing to rent to these places, or where is there an actual location they can purchase the building to put these operations? And that also coincides with the caps. The caps seem to be working rather well, and this would just be another form of cap.
Okay. I'll put you on the spot. What do you think about this?
I think the 400-foot spacing in between the facilities we have currently could work. If one goes out of business, they move, they sell their license, don't do anything, get in trouble with MED, get in trouble with us. It would definitely clear up our odor mitigation issues when we go out and actually have to do odor enforcement, because it's, okay, we have all these facilities along this block, go up and smell each door or knock and talk to each of the operations.
Okay. Questions?
I have a question. Just remind me what problem we're trying to solve by requiring this kind of spacing. Because if it's odor, I think we've got another one about odor.
Okay, so all of these in this Exhibit A, and it's arguable. I'm not saying that I would 100% advocate that these are, all equal strategies for addressing concentration of marijuana impacts, but that is what they're designed to do. The problem being particularly odor, but if you take crime as being a problem, or driving away business, or whatever neighbor complaints, and marijuana facilities being in a concentrated area, this is the problem they're trying to solve.
Okay.
Within that block on Buggy Circle, you have 10 operations, ranging from infused product manufacturing, actually doing the extraction, to just making the product itself. There's a lab over there. You have 3 grows. One's not in operation. Actually, 2 aren't in operation. So that's really a concentrated area where, we have a lot of operations. One's a problem child. The others have been good so far. But really, that's where it's all been concentrated to, and it's not really because of the 500-foot spacing or anything else like that, because there are other locations in town that they can go. It's just the availability of spaces.
Okay. I'm just not seeing a huge problem. I guess I'm concerned about the odor, but that seems to be a separate item, right? That we've got an odor mitigation, some changes to
It's
that.
perhaps the most direct way of
Yeah.
addressing odor as an impact.
And I remember, again, I was on P&Z when we first started dealing with this stuff and talking about unintended consequence of distance from schools, which everybody agreed was needed, was distance from schools, but that you would then sort of restrict the areas in which they could be, and it would end up concentrated. And so that's what we have now. I'm wondering what the unintended consequences might be of pushing them gradually out of that and spreading those impacts over town, whether that would be better or worse, whether if these were more spread out, or whether it might even be better to have them in a concentrated zone that is light industrial, and that's become sort of part of the identity of that block for now.
And that's kind of why the board and P&Z a ways back went away from those giant buffer zones that we had at that time, because essentially those buffers ended up spot zoning it into certain clusters.
Rusty, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so tell me again, is the Main Street spacing requirement just for dispensaries, or is it for everything other? I know it's not for everything other than testing, but is it for just dispensaries?
Right, because that's the only, it's dispensaries and stores, because that's the only allowed use that can go in there.
Oh, okay, because of the zoning.
Correct.
So I guess from a standpoint of at 1101 Village Road, where we have 3 businesses in that however many condos we have there, I think we have 35 units, I think. And the only reason I know this is because we tried to put we put a resolution forward to ask the owners to vote if they wanted to limit any other businesses. And so we had to have a 2/3 vote on 35, whatever that number is. Without my ad machine, I don't know. Unlike postal zip codes like you, Marty. At any rate, so we were only able to get 15 votes. And so we were kind of trying to decide, well, what to do there. And most of the folks, though, really didn't want to be limited in their property uses. If they want to sell or rent to whoever, they want to be able to sell or rent to whoever, because business is not exactly still booming on some of this. So anyhow, having said all that, just to get a little more information than what I'm seeing. And so what Village Road Association decided to do was wait and see what the town did before moving forward with anything else. I do think, though, that the spacing requirement coming out from, I don't know why we should have spacing requirement on Main Street and not at 1101 Village Road. I don't understand from the logic standpoint of that. But I think I'd be more inclined to do the spacing for dispensaries, just take what we have in place in downtown on Main Street and move that out as opposed to creating something totally new. I do know that there's folks in our association that would like to grandfather in what's there and maybe have the spacing then control. Although I know that Pioneer is applying to move from there to another location later on the agenda. So it is a kind of a complicated issue, and I don't know if what I said added any clarity to anything or not, but I guess what I would favor is we'd move the dispensary spacing out to Buggy Circle Village Road, but not the others.
And to be clear, you mean medical and marijuana store or dispensary?
Yeah.
And you mean for the whole town, not just a Buggy Circle, right?
Well, yeah.
Like
yeah,
make
but
that
we
a
need.
blanket.
I think we really. I don't know how much it's going to affect the rest of town. How much is it going to? Did I miss that, John? Did you just go over that up there? Because I'm sitting watching Village Road and have watched this. What's happened there in the last several years, and it's really not. It's not been an issue at this point. But I don't know that if we get one or two more, that it would not be an issue. So I think we're trying to do a little spot zoning, like John says there.
So just as kind of a procedural, this is a public hearing, and I'm thinking maybe we should go through these 3 items and then allow the public, because these are kind of the meaty ones. So if everybody's okay with it, let's talk about the next 2 and number 3, and then we can hear from the public and then deliberate on them, if that makes sense. Okay. So any other questions on the 400-foot spacing? We don't have to discuss it now, but no. Oh.
Well,
Not necessarily on that, but how close are we on the caps we spoke about the grow caps being limited at 3, but grandfathering them in. That was last meeting. But on the dispensary caps and the other caps, how close are we? They're capped at 5, right?
The retail stores are already capped out. They've been for a while, and I
Okay.
think there's 2 medical stores.
Okay, so there's
One's
still room
not,
for 3 more? Is that correct?
Non-operational.
Not operational, yeah.
One's not operational.
It has a
yeah,
license, but it's not open.
right.
But we've already decided on that cap, drop that to 3.
No,
Oh,
the
is
only
it-
cap
isn't
we
Marty
dropped,
just trying to see how many more
Right.
potential facilities we have.
the only cap we dropped to 3 was on the grow operations, was my understanding.
Right.
That's
Is that correct?
Right. Sorry.
Okay, so not on the dispensaries or anything else. So there's only room on those dispensaries. One we're capped out on, and the other one we
On
have
the stores.
Yep.
2 where one is active and one is inactive.
And the thing is, I don't know if this makes any any difference or not, but as far as the retail stores go, they're really spread out pretty nicely. I mean, they're kind of like all over town. There's, one right off, and there's 2 on Main Street, but they're far apart. But it's not like there's a great concentration of those, 5. I just thought I'd say that.
That's a good
So the
point.
concept- Sorry, the
No,
concentration there then is really a concentration of all different types of marijuana businesses, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's retail, it's manufacturing, and it's grow. And that's why it
And
feels
it's a
really
lot of
close.
MIPS, so when, there's a MIP, they usually have, so manufactured infused products, they usually have both medical and a retail, so it makes it look like there's a lot more, but they're doing business within, 4 walls. It's not like there's 2 businesses, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
So it
low,
makes it
low
look like
impact
there's a lot
traffic
more,
parking.
but,
Okay.
because there's a
Yeah.
lot of the licenses, but they're in.
So kind of an example on the screen there, the blue line would be the direct pedestrian access from Acme. That's their store there. And then the proposed location for the next retail store to go in. And that's by direct pedestrian access, that's, 630 feet.
Okay.
But it's also, within eyesight and shot, so.
Right. So that would be allowed even under this. Okay.
Correct.
Katrina.
A couple things. One is that I think, in this discussion, and I don't know if there's an adjustment that can be made to our packets, but I think it can seem like there isn't a problem in the discussion when there isn't the background of why we've built up to this problem. Because without having been here to hear public comments for years and years about this problem, I think it can be difficult to see. So I don't know if there's a way to sort of, when informing this discussion, we understand why it's a problem. Because I can understand why it looks like that. So for me, I think, if I were to transfer in my mind, if we're considering like strips of liquor stores or something like that, to try to equate it, like I feel like what we're actually doing is protecting the integrity of our community character and of our neighborhoods. And if there's one thing that is creating an imbalance that is being felt by the neighbors, both commercial and residential, and those difficulties are coming up, I think it's really important to try to mitigate that. I mean, I don't live over on that side of town, but I do know those impacts are felt, and just by what was demonstrated, I mean, I think it is the question of, do we intentionally want to create a marijuana district because inadvertently we're doing that, kind of. And I mean, I don't really. I would rather see a diversity of businesses and one thing, and I mentioned this before, but one of the things that is happening in Denver is that small businesses are being bought out and turned into marijuana cultivation businesses, flooring companies, and light industrial. So the diversity of businesses is actually decreasing because of the value of this particular market. So I like the idea of using the same spacing requirements that we have on Main Street, like Frosty said, and making those more universal across town. That makes sense to me, and that also feels equitable to all current business owners, because there is a diversity of businesses over there, and some of them don't care about the marijuana. Some of them, it might even give them more business, and other ones strongly dislike it. So there's that sort of spectrum of perspective over there. So I think the spacing is a good idea. I like the caps, and I do think they're working, but I think, there is something that needs to be addressed in this, and seeing it play out, I am less comfortable with just leaving it sort of checked the way it is.
Can we kind of hold deliberation until after public comment on these items? Because I think we've got a lot to cover, and I'm afraid we're going to lose Allison. So, Allison, will you introduce the odor mitigation number 2?
Sure. So, this is the second remaining criteria or possible strategy for addressing impacts. And like we were saying, it is the most direct at addressing the odor impact in particular. There had been, to Katrina's point, there had been public comment raised in the spring of this year about shared ventilation systems in a condo complex where normal businesses were operating right alongside marijuana businesses, and that was causing an impact to the day-to-day operations of those non-marijuana businesses. There's many other municipalities have struggled with how to address odor, particularly whether it's through requiring a certain technology, requiring a certain kind of practice, or just putting language on a page that requires your outcome of you shall not impact your neighbors. We've got a couple options here, and these are not exclusive. Building official John Plano recommends something fairly open-ended, but gives a lot of discretion to the town. Ventilation shall be designed by a Colorado licensed engineer to mitigate odors. Additional requirements may be required by the building department for specific locations or operations. And the benefit of that kind of open-ended language, of course, is that you can tailor it to the particular instance, and you give the town discretion to go in and fix things as needed. The other kind of option is legislating a more result-oriented sort of approach, where you say that license holders are required to reduce or eliminate marijuana odor to adjacent properties or to properties in the immediate vicinity or to properties within a set number of feet. And that is problematic to actually administer and enforce, but it is a different approach.
Okay. Questions on that one? Ben?
You said another approach is to require specific technology. Can you speak to that? That doesn't seem to be presented here as a
It wasn't a
draft.
staff recommendation.
Okay.
I'm gonna pan to anybody else who might.
With the Holland Hills facility,
Yeah.
they put in the latest and greatest lasers, misters, everything else under the sun that was billed as being, the latest and greatest technology, and now they're back to carbon filters. Because the latest and greatest, they essentially found out didn't work. And that's why, what John Plano recommended with, it's designed by a design professional. That design professional is putting his stamp on it, saying, okay, this is going to work, and if it doesn't work, we're going to go in there and fix it. And, like some of the operators that are here in the audience can probably attest to, weighing the filters, the carbon filters, so we get to a certain point, when to switch them out. When before we'd go into a facility and be like, when's the last time you switched out your filter? It stinks. And, well, we don't know. So a lot of them have been put on notice that the odor issue is definitely out there.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there? How does this differ from our current regulation? I mean, we have something about mitigating odors, right?
We do as part of the special use permit, but this actually plugs it into the code itself and also as part of the building permit that, hey, you have to do this. And it can also be put into the special use permit that, hey, you have to get a design professional to do this, or otherwise you just don't get your
So it's already
license.
in the special use permit. We're really just changing where this language is, but the
Right.
language itself is
Yeah.
basically the same. So the
Yeah.
process would be of meeting this requirement would be basically
Correct.
the same.
Yeah.
And does it seem to be working? I mean,
It does. Actually, one of the MIPS that just recently went up in operation, we haven't had any smell complaints from them. Our problem child operation's been put on notice, and granted, we haven't received any new drawings on their operation, but we haven't also received any new smell complaints from their operation ever since they were told that, hey, you need to have someone come in, design it, fix it, get it done.
okay, thank you.
This is basically giving John Plano the tools and the authorities, which we're kind of already doing, but formalizing the authority for it.
Yeah, I would say, and I should disclose, I work for an engineering firm, but we've never done any engineering for these facilities, so unless somebody sees a conflict. This language isn't specifically in there. Right now, you're not required to hire a licensed engineer, and I think, I don't want to put words in John Plano's mouth, but if we were to require the latest and greatest technology and it doesn't work, there's no what's the word I'm looking for? Recourse, thank you. But with this, you can go back to the PE and say it's not working.
Got you.
Kathy?
So I also think John feels that he doesn't want to call out specific technology because it's changing so rapidly, and that he thought by just having this broad, you have to go to an engineer and he's going to know what the latest and greatest is. I think it just kind of takes care of it in the one sentence.
Okay, Marty?
Yeah, we spoke about best practices. The problem is best practices, especially in this industry, which is changing so rapidly. what's best practices today is not going to be best practices a year from now. So this kind of, I realize it's a broad statement, but you have the engineer, and it still gives us leeway, you know.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the third one, and then we'll let the public speak? Okay. Renewable energy.
So, I guess the only way that this can be viewed as a tool for addressing concentration of impacts, requiring a certain amount of renewable energy offset, is, I guess, in barrier to entry, because really it's not. It's kind of it's its own topic altogether. But we've been throwing it out as a tool for addressing concentration of impacts for the last few months. Right now, marijuana facilities, or excuse me, just cultivation facilities are required to offset 30% of their energy use, whether by off-site or on-site technologies. But there is a proposal to increase that from 30 to either 50 to 100% renewable offset. Because at a previous meeting it was discussed that this maybe isn't commensurate with what other commercial enterprises are required to do. We pulled the town's green building energy requirements, which are 10% on-site renewable energy or 15% off-site. So this proposal for an increase in renewable energy offset for marijuana cultivation facilities is quite a bit higher.
Questions? AJ?
I'll just have a statement I'd like to make about that. That way, if anyone from the industry comes up to speak about it, they can address it. I personally feel everything should be required to be 100% renewable on site, no matter what we build. And for marijuana specifically, because grows are so energy intensive, my thought would be 50% required on-site or 100% offset. And so if anyone wanted to address that, just the practicality of that, how much energy you're using, how much you could actually produce on-site with solar panels or something. So that's it.
Katrina?
I am supportive of increasing the requirement from 30% to 50%, and I spoke with some people in the clean energy field about this topic. And you know, for me, this industry, which has been an important economic driver and job creator in our town, you know, I think we've had a lot of benefits, also is using lights from electricity to grow plants. And the lights that they're using is from electricity that is produced from natural gas and coal sources. And to me, propagating an industry that's using light to grow plants using that kind of fuel source is inconsistent with the will of the community. So, I mean, I think it's great that we have 30%, but I think, you know, and maybe it's different with medicinal than recreational, but especially considering the recreational nature of it, I think 50% is fair.
Okay. Is there anyone from the...
Can I just ask a really quick clarifying question? Do we have any information from other towns on where they've gone with this, or states or anything?
No, and offhand, because I have seen so many other town regulations in the past year, I can't say that they treat marijuana cultivation is different from other facilities. I think Carbondale is probably more cutting edge in that respect.
But do other towns address the energy use? Maybe that's the question.
Right, I don't think that there's a specific, I mean, I couldn't say without looking. In what I've seen, I haven't seen renewable energy offset requirements as a glaring higher requirement than other types of, I'm rambling, I haven't seen it.
Okay. And then just a technicality that says required to offset their energy use with renewable energy credits. Is that different from saying renewable energy sources, whether on-site or off-site? Because it sounds like it's currently says renewable energy sources, whether on-site or off-site, and the draft language says with renewable energy credits.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just want to know if we're changing the metric there, or if
No, I think it's meant to be renewable energy on-site or off-site, not carbon.
Okay.
Yeah, good call.
Okay, are there members who'd like to address the board on this issue? James, if you just come to the dais and give us your name and address.
Just a quick question. Why the, James Leonard, live at 580 Main Street. Why the difference between off-site and on-site renewable energy requirement?
On-site is much more useful and practical, and as far as literally being self-sufficient as a community, producing our own energy. Off-site is still good, but if we're buying credits in Nebraska, I guess overall the greater good is using renewable energy, but we're still using a source that we just fought as a community to try and outlaw. It's kind of like, do I want to diet for myself or have someone else eat healthy for me, is the way I view it.
Okay. I just feel like photovoltaics in particular are kind of specific to the exact location of said cultivation. So that could be a huge barrier to entry for someone. But other than that, I don't really have a comment on it. I know the year that I was required to do this, I bought, I think, close to 60% renewable energy off-site.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank you.
James. Anyone else?
Do you want to clarify this on any of the topics? Because I don't know if they're
Yeah.
related.
Thank you. So we're talking about all three of the topics we just reviewed, the 400-foot spacing, the odor mitigation, as well as the renewable energy offsets. So any comments on any of those three topics? All right.
Jesse Miller, 492 Morrison. I'm all for solar and renewable energy, but an experience I went through back January, we tried to put a greenhouse opposite Ross Montessori, and for that very purpose. But city code or P&Z does not allow for heating or running electric to a greenhouse, to do light supplement in the winter and light deprivation in the summer. So that's one way, I think, looking at that code or coming up with some way to offset that they could use greenhouses to grow from a cultivation standpoint would be beneficial or solve the problem, I guess.
Thanks.
400-foot thing's really not gonna impede us as an industry, I don't think.
Thank you, Jesse. Any other comments? Jay?
And just to clarify real quick, the code which Jesse was talking about was our commercial green
Right.
code, and actually meeting the overall requirements of that code. It's not just specific to greenhouses, but to get a building which actually meets all that, those code requirements are really tough on a year-round greenhouse, no matter what the industry would be.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, one other thing on the smell mitigation, we just went through this with ROPC and Rifle. Positive air pressure has a lot to do with it, and so I think having a professional that actually came in, measured the cubic foot, and knew what they were doing to create an environment, because you're adding air conditioning, which is creating a positive pressure, pushing the smell out of the building. So in terms, and the technologies, you know, they work if they're utilized properly. So, but if you have a positive air pressure with all the latest and greatest working technology, it's really not gonna matter, because the air is gonna get pushed out past the technology.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse. Okay, with no further comments, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for deliberation on these three particular items. So,
Could I suggest that we start with number 2, because it seems to be probably the most straightforward?
go for it.
I mean, I would propose that we accept the language as proposed by John Plano. It sounds like it's working well. It's already in another part of our process, which says ventilation shall be designed by a Colorado licensed engineer to mitigate odors. Additional requirements may be required by the building department for specific locations or operations. I mean, that's pretty vague at the end, but if that's what's working now, and that's what staff recommends, and the industry doesn't seem to be opposed to it, Seems like a good solution.
I concur. Marty?
Me too. I think that one, I think we probably can all agree on.
Okay. Anybody not agree with adding that language? Okay, great.
Should we save it for one big motion or take these motion at a time or?
Well, it'll come back to us, so we don't technically need a motion. But go ahead, Allison.
So procedurally, because these are all going to result in updates to the Uniform Development Code, nothing can be done tonight.
Okay.
There, except the spacing goes into the Muni Code, and so that may be done tonight. So I'll guide you at the end. Let's get consensus on each, and then we'll make sure the right motions are made.
The only thing I might say, just to clarify that last sentence there, is just maybe say additional odor mitigation requirements may be required by the building department, just so it's tied into the same thing.
But just so, Allison, just to clarify, it seems like we have agreement on that. Can we put that aside so that if there isn't agreement on, okay.
And I would say, as an amendment that someone might consider making to the language, additional odor mitigation requirements may be required during the period of the license. So it's clear that this isn't just when a special use permit is delivered, then there's no more requirements. And that's something that you all maybe don't agree with, but where with the Holland Hills operation as an example, Picken County has gone out to the site throughout the license term to monitor smell issues because they've been so egregious, and it hasn't just been one time at the time that the special use permit is delivered.
I think that opens up a can of worms. Now all of a sudden you're saying, even though you had it designed by a professional engineer, if it's not working, it's an open, they've got to write a blank check, and that can never be resolved, really. So I think this language is appropriate, personally. Katrina?
If we're not going to be able to enforce on it or change it during the period of the license, which was what that would allow us to do, I think it needs a minimum or something. I mean, we're basically saying, like, you know, if somebody comes in and designs something that will be probably new and different than something that's been used before, because they're unique to each site and there's insights about negative and positive pressure and whatever, but if that new system just is a total fail, we can't do anything about it, right?
That's correct.
It is enforceable through the special use permit.
It is already, right?
Without adding the language that Allison was just suggesting.
Correct.
And that's your understanding too, Allison?
I have to defer to John, but
So we have the language that says we can revoke your special use permit if you're not meeting the odor control, but if we put this in the requirement for a building permit, to what standard are we holding them? And that's what gives me a lot of concern. What we're saying is we're going to trust that a licensed engineer is going to come up with a good system, and it's going to work.
And then we can monitor its working through the special use permit based
Correct.
on complaints as we currently do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm comfortable with that as long as it's clear without adding that additional language that we have enforcement action that we can take.
and I have to defer to John as being more familiar with the UDC.
Okay. So is everybody okay with the modifications that Ben made, that we would just add odor mitigation, additional odor mitigation requirements may be required, yada, yada, yada? Okay. All right, so we can put that one to bed.
I'd go with spacing next.
Let's talk about spacing.
Trying to go from easy to hard.
Anybody feel strongly one way or the other to support the 400-foot spacing? AJ?
I feel like this is a very good thing to help protect the character and safety of our community with not big impacts. And if we find out that it becomes a big impact that we later regret, we can always move back on it. But it will be very hard to go forward without it if we don't do it now.
Okay, Marty?
I kind of feel like the ship has already sailed on creating a marijuana zone or marijuana industry zone. in that Buggy Circle Village Road area. I think the 400 square foot, it isn't going to make a huge difference. Only 3 still permits available from what I understand. And, but I think it's a sign in the right direction that it'd be, if it's 400 square feet on Main Street, why shouldn't it be 400 square feet, in that area? So I think it's showing a sign of good faith of equitableness, whether intentionally or unintentionally, the way it's been set up in the past, it created this green area. With the existing existing businesses being grandfathered in, which I don't think anyone disputes because we don't want to take anyone's livelihood away from them. I don't see it's having a huge impact. I think it just kind of levels the playing field with different neighborhoods, different areas of town.
Okay.
I just have a question. Are we, when you guys are referring to this right now, are you talking about spacing just between retail, which is both recreational and medical, as Frosty suggested? Or are you talking about and 400-foot spacing between grow operations, which I think is the way it's written here. It just says.
What it would be is every single type of medical and retail facility.
Okay.
So MIPS, cultivation, retail stores, centers, medical MIPS, and I'm missing one, medical cultivation. All of those would be required to be 400 feet away from each other.
From anything or from similar facilities?
No, from all.
Okay,
So if you're any kind of marijuana license, you have to be 400 feet away from all other marijuana licenses, except for testing facilities and those that we grandfather.
Okay. Other comments? Guys, I'm sorry we closed the public hearing on this one.
That impact dual usage.
Jesse?
Katrina has something.
I think that it would be a benefit to all of them. I mean, again, I think these are really valuable businesses to have in town, but where we're concentrating the impacts, and there are impacts that are different than other types of businesses, I think that we're creating an undue burden on the community. So I'd like to see a 400-foot spacing between any type of facility, but at the very least, I like the idea of at least just making the 400 feet between the dispensaries or retail shops like there is on Main Street throughout town.
So, Kathy, go ahead.
So just if you could clarify something for me, and it is what Jesse has a really good point, is that, so a lot of these MIPS, when they come in, they want a medical and a retail. And they'll have maybe a medical and retail store, which is what SP is doing on Main Street. So would they go away because of the 400 foot?
You mean a coterminous or co-located?
Yeah.
No, and I can address that in
Okay.
the language.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, that's a good, I'm not sure, I can't think in my mind how you would clarify that. If we
It's
just-
actually, we already use it's a defined term in the
Okay.
licensing,
Okay.
coterminous and co-located, and we've never had any spacing requirements between what would be coterminous or co-located facilities. So it'll take some, art, but it's a good point, and it's not something that we can't do.
Okay, Kathy, thank you for bringing that up. Other comments on 400-foot spacing? I'm hearing support. Anybody not agree with the 400-foot spacing?
I'm just really hesitant because I don't know where all those businesses that are concentrated now, I guess we grandfather them in. This would only apply if they change hands, is that right? Like they could renew their permit to operate, but it would be if they change hands or go out of business.
It's basically like a non-conformity, where if they, seek to expand, or if they seek to change locations, or if they no longer, the license lapses, then they wouldn't be able to operate in that same location if it was in the 400-foot buffer of another facility.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of where I'd rather those grow operations be in town, basically. I'm thinking, okay, one changes hands, they can't keep it there because there's one next door, where do we want it? And I can't really come up with a lot of better locations.
But I didn't hear you say if it's sold, if the business sold. If it's sold, it also loses its license at that location.
Let me, because I have some language that we've used for other grandfathering. Let me pull it and see if you guys like it, because that's what I would have used for, for
So
this.
if there's a transfer of ownership, that can maybe be grandfathered too, or something, like if it's the same business at the same location or something like that.
I mean, it sounds like if it's a renewal, then the restriction doesn't apply. If it's not a renewal, the restriction would apply. And I think I share Ben's concern that I think there could be some benefit from this, but I'm not convinced that it's necessary or even beneficial. So to me, as Ben alluded to earlier, I think the odor mitigation gets at the impact that we're trying to address. We haven't seen any other really significant impact other than odor, at least that I've learned about. So to me, I'm not going to support the 400-foot spacing just because I'm not convinced it's going to be a community benefit. So any other comments on this, Marty?
Yeah, if it's grandfathered in, I would think if someone goes to sell their business and it's the same business, you know, if a liquor store is selling to a new owner and it's still a liquor store, I would think it'd still be grandfathered in. I would certainly hope so. Because otherwise, we're taking their business away from them. The right to transfer their business, which I don't think is the intent of anyone here.
Licenses was grandfathered.
So
As
Allison,
long as the use doesn't change, so if they had a.
Right, if they have a
had
cultivation and they want
retail,
to change it to
they
retail,
can't.
that'd be a problem.
Right.
okay. So this is one, are we going to bring this back and approve actual language?
No, well,
'Cause right
we
now
can
we-
yank spacing out of the ordinance that you have in front of you tonight, because it effectively won't be, it won't be consistent with the UDC. So we don't have to do it tonight. We could do it when the UDC is done.
I think we're going to have to wait on all these exhibits to keep ourselves on agenda. I was trying to get agreement on these three big ones,
Sure.
but we may not get there. So tell me again, can we agree conceptually, well, whatever the motion is, but if there's agreement on 400-foot spacing,
Yeah.
at a future date, we're going to have to hear what the language is and how that pertains to existing businesses.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll pull it out, and we're not going to get to the other ordinance in the exhibit D or E tonight.
Okay.
Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see, but we'll see.
Well, then I think we should pull it out of that ordinance in any case, because it's not going to be finalized tonight with where we're at.
Okay. So that's an ordinance D, and we'll get back to that. So anybody want to make a motion on the 400-foot spacing?
I'd like to make a motion to include the language for 400-foot spacing between marijuana establishments.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Marty. Any further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign?
No.
No. Okay, if my math is correct, that does not pass.
And I could potentially support that if it was limited to the way Frosty and I think Katrina said she could support that potentially as well between retail storefronts essentially. Really, my main concern here is I just don't know where else we want those grow operations to go.
Mark?
Katrina first.
Well, I was going to make a different motion.
Okay, can I just make a quick comment? We've already limited the grow operations to 3, and we have more than 3 currently. So I don't see us getting more grow operations.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think that's a concern of where the grow operations are going to go if we already limited town-wide the grow operations to 3. So that's just to address your point about the grow operations. I'm sorry, Katrina.
Thanks, Marty. I'd like to make a motion to add a 400-foot spacing limit between any proposed retail marijuana facilities, consistent with what we have for Main Street.
Second.
Clarifying questions, so you're talking about blanket the whole town?
All the same rule
Okay.
that we have on Main Street.
Just for retail as opposed to any type. Questions on that motion?
Does that include medical and recreational?
Is there a different term for medical retail? It's,
No, so they are actually, it's medical and retail, and they're two different things.
Okay.
Recreational and retail are kind of
Okay.
synonyms.
Does your motion apply to all?
I'm okay actually with it just being retail. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not as worried about the medical places.
So a motion to create 400-foot spacing between retail marijuana dispensaries only. Who seconded that one?
No.
AJ.
So a dispensary is medical.
Oh, sorry.
So, can
Retail
you say
marijuana.
the motion again? I didn't quite understand.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to add a 400-foot spacing limitation between any proposed retail marijuana facility within town limits.
You mean retail marijuana store?
Oh, yeah, because facility means all the things.
Yeah.
Right.
All facilities, right?
Retail marijuana.
It's just retail.
Retail
Just
marijuana.
retail stores.
She's making this, so she's basically expanding the existing 400-foot spacing limitation between retail marijuana stores that exists on Main Street
Townwide.
to be a townwide
Townwide. It's just on stores.
restriction.
Thanks.
AJ, are you still second that? Thanks. Okay. Questions on the motion? Frosty?
I'm not sure that's where we are. It's, what I was trying to do was consistently apply what we've already got in place on Main Street, and that's retail and medical. And we're capped, our retail is capped right now, so we can't have any more retail anyhow. But I would like to have consistency in what we have, but I don't want to have something that's not consistent and have a whole new rule out there that Kathy has to keep up with about.
So you're asking her to include,
Yeah, I'm not necessarily asking, but I'm just wondering why we don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's reasonable. I think I just have a different feeling about a medical facility as
yeah.
being maybe in some instances critical to health, but what I'm going for is consistency and uniformity throughout town limits.
so do you amend your motion?
Yeah, I'll amend the motion to
Second
include
stands.
Okay.
medical dispensaries.
So 400-foot spacing between medical, retail, and medical dispensaries across town.
Right.
Okay.
Same, it's the Main Street rule applied everywhere. Kathy's still looking at us like we're speaking a foreign language.
The coterminus is going to apply where, so if they have a medical, like CMed, they have medical and retail within their one building, so the coterminus is going to, right?
Yeah.
They'll be allowed to.
They'll be allowed, yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And grandfathering of existing facilities.
So amended.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye. Or meaning no. Okay. So we'll move forward with that one. So we are 10 minutes past time. There are a few items that I think it's very important that we address tonight. Is there anything on here that Allison or trustees feel is essential we address tonight regarding marijuana regulations?
For me, the renewable energy, but if that's going to go into, for me, that's an easy decision, but if that's going to go into a long discussion, I understand.
Allison, what about these different exhibits?
Okay, sure. Well, I would say anything that has to do with the UDC is not our best use of time because we can't accomplish anything on that tonight. But please know that that's something that I'm going to continue to work with the rest of staff on and try and get as far as we can so that it's something that doesn't stall out in September. So that's Exhibit B. We're not going to touch it tonight. Exhibit E, cannabis clubs, I'm not so much concerned with addressing that. You all can read those comments, and it's a brave new world if that's where you want to go. But let's, if we have any time left, go to Exhibit C, which references Exhibit D, and that's making the 2 staff recommended changes to the municipal code, something that we could do tonight. Exhibit C is on page 109. If we have time, I can cover it quickly.
Okay. Does the board agree that we can probably get through this pretty quickly? And okay, go for it, Allison.
Okay. So these are two issues that staff raised. The first issue is actually this may have been raised at a prior meeting by the trustees. I wasn't here. There are licensed premises in the town that aren't operating, and there's a concern that with the caps that we have on marijuana facilities, non-operational licenses aren't a good thing. We have in front of you tonight language that it's not discretionary. It's a requirement that the town clerk would not issue a renewal of a license if the facility has not been operating in the previous year. Non-operational being not open for business and no product or services being moved in the license year. That was a staff recommendation. I don't know if there's any discussion you all want to have before I move to the next one.
No, because we're going to have to open this up or at least I want to open up to the public because we didn't talk about this before. So let's talk about the second one.
Okay. The second issue is adding additional public hearing requirements for changes in location or for modification in a licensed premise. Presently, the code doesn't require a public hearing. It basically punts to the requirements at the state level, which don't require a public hearing. And so you could have a license in a set location and then apply to change that license location, and neighbors wouldn't be notified and wouldn't be given an opportunity to make comment. On the modification of premises side, we've recommended that for modifications of premises that result in a larger scope of marijuana product, that those types of modifications trigger a public hearing requirement because neighbors have an additional impact to bear. The recommendation is that changes of location be processed through a public hearing in front of the Board of Trustees. Changes to premises be processed by planning and zoning through a redo of the special use requirements, special use permitting requirements.
Questions of Allison on this one? Thank you, Allison. So we'll reopen the public hearing on these two particular issues. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to address the two issues Allison just spoke of? Okay. Yes, sir.
I was hoping you could define.
If you could come to the dais and give us your name and address.
Jeff Springer, 1536 Daily Drive, Erie, Colorado. Hoping you could define operation within the past year. Would that be the day after the renewal, then no more, the day before the renewal?
What the language says, and this is imperfect attorney language that can be changed, as you all may decide. Non-operational, not open for business, and did not sell marijuana product or services from its licensed premise during the immediately preceding license year.
Okay.
So it's all three of those things. If you are, let's see, the town clerk shall deny a license if the facility was not operational and it was not open for business and it did not sell marijuana product or services from the facility in that year.
Okay. So if it was open for business, sold marijuana on one day of that prior year, that would be considered operational?
Well, and that would be, I mean, you would still have a public hearing, but it wouldn't trigger the immediate denial by the town clerk.
Okay, fantastic. And then in relation to modification of premises, can you define products, or the expansion of products? What is that?
Sure, let me see. The proposed language is seeks to increase facility size or otherwise increase or enhance production of marijuana.
Fairly broad.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on these two particular issues? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any questions, comments on these two issues? I have a quick question, Allison. How comfortable are you that if we were to, rather than say must be operational, if we sort of took the water rights approach and said you must show due diligence?
I, as your typical attorney, have no opinion. This is my particular recommendation. I'm just the craftsman of the language.
Okay.
I think we
Kathy,
should-
how do you feel about that?
I kind of think you would need a measurement. You know, like he could say, yeah, well, I was operational for one day. I mean, I don't know how he would prove it to me, but I guess he'd pay sales tax. But I think it should have a definitive kind of time frame. What?
Something more qualitative.
Yeah, that they haven't
Okay.
been open in the last year, so
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Katrina?
What's going on right now, I'm fine with it.
I like this one because I think it prevents speculation of business ownership and license ownership in the town, and that I would like to see that if somebody's going to invest in the community, I think, and especially with like our local residence requirement, I think the intent is to really have these businesses accountable to the community, and I think, you know, opening the business is a part of that, and that non-renewal, if it's not open, is reasonable. And I think, and I agree with Kathy that, I mean, I think one day might be suspect, you know, an operation like that. But if, I mean, but also, you know, there's an opportunity to tell the story of why it was only one day in the hearing, and it would prevent, you know, the automatic denial. But I like this one. I think it's effective for the community, and I would support it.
So Allison, procedurally, if our motion is to approve Exhibit D, are we effectively approving it, or do we need to act separately for these two issues, or just approve Exhibit D in that ordinance?
We would approve Exhibit D, and I have a couple small modifications because I caught errors that I made, and I would also take out the spacing placeholders.
Right.
About 5 pages of this ordinance have to do with potential action on the spacing between marijuana establishments.
Okay. Marty?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, I like the staff recommendations. I think we're trying to avoid people keeping licenses just as placeholders or speculating. I mean, if they're opening the business, then they're opening the business. They're bringing sales tax, jobs, whatever. If they're just taking the license, and even if, you know, if they're projecting future expansion, that's fine. But they need to show some sign that they're going ahead with it, not just that they're tying up a license, especially with the limitations that we have on the number of licenses available. The licenses themselves become a commodity, and I don't think we want to see that.
So if there aren't any other questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve Exhibit D, and since there's no ordinance number, I don't know what we can do, but the ordinance as part of Exhibit D, minus language referring to spacing and minor typographical corrections.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by AJ. Okay. Further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. AJ, how about we address renewable energy before, sometime in August?
Sounds good.
That, board's okay with that? All right. And then what else would we have to cover?
But do you have to be here for that?
No, and what we have in Exhibit B is a placeholder for all of these UDC-related changes.
Okay.
And so whatever gets decided, hopefully someone can let me know, and then we can draft it, you know, on leave.
You'll be waiting with bated breath, won't
Yes.
you? Okay, so we will move on. Does anybody need a break?
I'd love a
Okay,
5-minute break.
let's take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 7:55.
No.
You still doing these things?
Late?
It'll go so fast. You'll see me before.
I'm gonna be at Thursday's meeting. Yes.
Okay, I probably will, because I've got a doctor. So I'll check
Yeah, I took like 2 hours of vacation from work. I said,
In like
make sure.
this right now.
So it's 400-foot spacing on any proposed retail and medical establishments. Just sales and dispensaries, so retail sales and retail or medical dispensaries.
Okay.
So what I think we
We
should
will
do.
bring this meeting back to order
We're not going to adopt it.
and talk about item number 11,
So it's just.
consideration of Cooper Place Community Housing Mitigation Plan. John or Janet?
Okay.
Janet?
Thank you.
It's actually
So you're familiar with this project, I believe. It's Cooper Place Rentals. P&Z approved a minor site plan review for 2 lots, and it's to construct 5 units on both lots. And the UDC requires that 1 unit be deed restricted on each lot. And these are rental housing units, so this is a little bit unusual. They're not for sale units. And so P&Z suggested a condition that the deed restricted unit be restricted to category 1 or the 80% AMI. And that's because the minor site plan review was accompanied by a variance for the minimum lot size. And so P&Z felt it was of value to keep that 5th unit and not deny it, but at the same time to ask the applicant if they're willing to deed restrict that rental unit to 80% AMI. And the way the UDC reads is that the board needs to approve any housing mitigation plan. And so that's why this is before you tonight. The minor site plan is already approved. It's contingent upon approval of this housing plan and also contingent upon approval of a development improvement agreement that'll come before you in a couple of weeks. So I recommend approval of the housing proposal put forth by the applicant. And I did include some conditions in the report. Basically, if the housing plan is approved, that we get a draft deed restrictions drafted by the town attorney. No COs issued for either 10 or 15 Cooper Place for the free market units until the community housing or deed restricted unit is in place. And any condominiumization in the future, they would need to comply with the housing guidelines.
Okay.
And if the board is in favor of this, we would put this housing plan within a development improvement agreement that's coming to you on August 23rd. And we would bundle up with that for your consideration. But what we'd like tonight is guidance and basically approval of this housing plan. And I recommend approval of the plan.
Thank you, Janet. Mark, would you like to address or add anything to what Janet said?
Yeah, just real quickly, Mark Chain Consulting. This is Andy Mishmash of Cooper Place LLC. Part of the requirements for a housing project are meeting affordable housing, and it was a bit difficult because rental housing is not part of the town's guidelines. I did have some experience working in the Mid-Valley area with Basalt and Eagle County related to rental housing, because some people say you can't have rental housing as part of your guidelines, and that's not really, it's not really true. And at least in that part of the Mid-Valley, the 2 jurisdictions are actually fairly close on the affordable housing requirements, so nobody's jurisdiction shopping. But anyway, we put together an affordable housing mitigation plan as another part of this. We did some analysis and work on rental criteria and how to incorporate that information into the town's larger housing guidelines. And I forwarded that stuff off to the Housing Authority in late June. They've given 1 or 2 comments. They've given me a sample deed restriction. And staff has had those too. They're still, they haven't gotten back with the full range of comments, but incorporating rental into the housing guidelines is a very different topic, and it's something I think you need to work on in the next 6 months before some other projects come before you. Anyway, we think that we met the spirit of the affordable housing guidelines, and I have we're fine with conditions. I have nothing further to add at this point. I just bought this in case someone has questions. We can look at some charts or something, but I am not going to open up the computer unless I'm requested.
Are you okay with all the conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mark or Janet? Katrina.
I thought this was a great solution. I really commend your cooperation on this, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And thank you for highlighting that this is a unaddressed issue in our housing guidelines, because I think it could be, and I think this is a great precedent to look at how we can encourage that in the future. So thank you.
I echo that compliment. Okay. Seeing no comments or questions, would anyone like to make a motion on this?
Move to approve the Cooper Place Community Housing Plan for inclusion in a development improvements agreement to be considered, or not even to be considered, just move to approve that. Just reading exactly.
Second. Motion by Katrina, second by AJ. Further questions or comments?
I would just add that I appreciate the work that Mark Chain did on this and bringing some recommendations that we look at in the near future, and I totally agree. I mean, we agreed to continue talking about affordable housing at upcoming work sessions, and maybe this is one of the first things we should really look at is the rental situation. I never realized that it was a gaping hole in our affordable housing guidelines until this, that it's just completely unclear. So I
just made
appreciate
that note. Okay.
He's got something over there.
Marty.
I just want to compliment Andrew also as the developer for complying with this and coming up with a creative way to give us some affordable housing, in turn for which you got your development. So
Thanks, Marty.
it's kind of like a win-win.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next item, development improvement agreement with True Nature. Janet, any introduction for us?
Okay, yes. Bob Schultz is here on behalf of True Nature. Basically, this is a little bit different, but True Nature submitted a building permit to construct a kiva and a spa over on the vacant on that property where there used to be the house and the water wheel with the ditch. They're planning to do that. They weren't required to go through any land use process. They were simply going through building permit. So right now, the building permit is in the building department. It's basically ready to be issued. The only planning process it went through is True Nature wanted to back up into the alley for the parking that's along the alley. That went to P&Z. P&Z approved that. That's a planning commission level review. The reason why this is in front of you tonight is we have the town ditch running through the property. And in order to construct the kiva on the property, they would have to relocate the ditch. And because it's a town ditch is like a sewer main or a water main. It's a town facility. And in order to do that, they need to enter into a development improvement agreement, which is really similar to a subdivision improvement agreement, but there is no subdivision. So that's what's before you tonight is consideration of the subdivision improvements agreement. And basically what this agreement does is it outlines the construction regulations, what they need to do as far as inspections, posting security, requiring the 2-year warranty period, and allowing us to hold a 10% over that 2-year period. And we've looked at it as staff. You know, I've included engineering, utilities, public works, building department, and we're all in agreement with the engineering plans and the landscape plans that were attached to the improvement agreement. And I would recommend approval of the improvement agreement. Would answer any questions that you may have.
Bob, do you want to add anything to that? Bob wants to stay silent. Okay. Any questions of Janet then?
Just to clarify, so this isn't any kind of change in ownership or control of the ditch easement. It's moving it,
Yeah.
and it's piping part of it And as far as I can tell by the landscape plan, then it's putting in a concrete channel and leaving part of it exposed on the surface. Is
Leaving
that?
some of it open. And the good thing is, right now, we don't have an easement for that ditch.
But we have a prescriptive easement, not a.
Okay.
And so what this does, it gives us a formal easement, and that's part of the documentation.
Okay.
So, which was a good thing.
Okay.
So.
Jay and/or Allison, I don't know if you reviewed it or Mark did, but are you guys okay with the agreement and all the language in it?
It's pretty standard. What we tried to mirror on this in terms of maintenance obligations is where the ditch is put in pipe, we end up taking care of it. Where it ends up being more of a channeled through the property, that the applicant ends up being responsible for those sections. It mirrors Thompson Park pretty carefully. We, in general, don't like to relocate ditches through properties, but sometimes there's no choice to actually utilize the property. And so this one was a significant engineering exercise to come up with one which would work for all the parties. And after a fair amount of engineering going back and forth, I think we've got the spot for a workable solution, or else we wouldn't have brought it.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Katrina?
I looked at this really carefully because the ditch is kind of, and the super clean water skipper, minnowy water in it is super sacred to me, and so anything changes we make to it, I consider carefully, and this I think is good. I think the engineering has been really extensive, exhaustive, and very well planned out, and I think the project is going to be really beautiful. My thought, as I was really weighing it, is that I mean, it's really the only concern that I really clearly could forward is that where we're piping it and the location of the kiva in the overall watershed towards the nature park. I just don't ever want there to be a situation where there's a problem with any of these pipes and that could result in any kind of water flow into the kiva, because there's a couple of angles that we're putting in, and we're changing the flow of the ditch, from straight to sideways. And so, I'm sure the engineers have looked at that and that's all been taken into consideration, but, because we are rerouting it and it is close to the end of the ditch where it kind of like releases down into the nature park. So I think in terms of impacts on the ditch itself, I think it's pretty straightforward. And I think it's going to be, I talked with Jay about the maintenance, and it seems like it's actually going to be easier for us to maintain in the pipe through, and the open, beautiful part will be taken care of by True Nature. So those were my only real concerns, and if you guys feel comfortable. Oh, and that I didn't see any specification for time for this project if the ditch is on or off. I just think it'll be easier if it's off, which is October 15th to April 15th.
For the record, I did try.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
The first concern, everywhere there's a change in angle, there is a access point to get in there and clean it out if something happens. It's coming into this property in a pipe, so this pipe is bigger than the pipe that goes into this property.
Okay.
So the engineers have considered that relatively fail-safe.
Great.
And with regard to, what was your second question?
Construction times outside of ditch season.
It has to be done out after October 15th or before April 15th. So November 15th of 2017 is the deadline for having it done in the agreement. The anticipation is that it will occur between October 15th and November 15th of 2017.
Okay.
It's currently in a temporary pipe, and that was done so that construction vehicles can drive over it during the creating of the kiva, and then that will go away, and the new one will be done once the ditch is turned off.
Awesome. It looks like a beautiful project. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Bob, just to you and Eden, I think anytime we see existing businesses expand, but just particularly with what's likely to be a beautiful improvement, I'm happy and grateful, so thank you.
Well, I guess just a question along those lines. I really like the fact that today that so much of the site is just open to the public, and it really opens up to the iPads and all that. Will this be an area that people can still access that way, or is this more
Yeah, the
private?
current Peace Garden expands onto this. There's actually walking on top of this building. Most of the building is underground. And it forms a little bit of a natural amphitheater for any events that take place there.
Right. Yeah, well, I would just say publicly that I really love what True Nature's done with that piece of property, and it's almost like we've gotten a great piece of in-town, beautifully, designed open space through the private sector, and it's a pretty amazing thing. So I really welcome this.
Welcome it so much you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve this agreement.
Second.
Motion by Ben, seconded by Marty. Further comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Janet?
Well, you're in time.
Thanks, Janet.
Okay. Moving on to item number 13, modification of premises of retail and medical marijuana infused product facilities, SP Manufacturing. So, do we have any arm wrestling? It's Michael, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. And this is Jeff Springer, who works with us. He's our compliance guy, and so I was trying to get him involved in some of these things.
Staff has provided all the background. Is there anything you want to add to what has been submitted, or any other comments? It's not necessary, but you're welcome to.
No, just that, I think it's clear that we want to get in and start using the facility, and then we'll, as we get smarter, we'll figure out what kind of equipment we're going to bring in to do extraction processes. But for now, it's going to be more just, putting stuff together and having other people do the extractions and
Okay.
working from there.
Comments, questions of the applicant or staff? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion on this particular one, which I don't have in front of me, but
I make a motion to approve the modification of premises, retail and medical marijuana infused product facilities for SP Manufacturing.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion by AJ, seconded by Katrina. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you and good luck.
Easy. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Okay, item number 14, modification of premises of retail and medical marijuana infused product facilities and retail cultivation, Colorado Product Services. James. You know the drill. Anything you want to add, or?
Nope.
Okay.
The thing with, I don't know if it's been a while and I was away, but the thing with James is the med came in, and whenever they come in, they bring a site plan with them, and they make sure that everything adheres, and he didn't have it labeled that he had an extraction room. So they made him get a modification of premises so he says that it has an extraction room. So that's what you're either approving or denying tonight.
Okay. So you didn't cross your T's and dot your I's, so now you're back.
Yep, they're pretty strict.
Okay. Questions or comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the modification of premises of retail and medical marijuana infused product facilities and retail cultivation for Colorado Product Services.
Second.
Motion by AJ, seconded by Katrina. Further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Good job. Guess what? We're back on schedule.
Caught up.
How'd you do that?
I thought those were going to be harder than
Simple
they were.
pleasures of life for me. Okay, item number 15, change of location, Sweet Leaf Pioneer.
We're ahead of schedule.
Mr. Manzanares, is that right? Did I pronounce it right?
You sure did. Dave Manzanares, 419 Washington Street in Eagle.
Thank you. So again, we've seen most of it. Is there anything you'd like to add, or?
No, there really isn't.
Okay. Straightforward, change the location. Any questions or comments?
A simple comment, I approve this and glad it's happening. And one of the reasons I supported our discussion earlier for the 400-foot spacing is because now that one of the applicants may be moving, an area that's highly concentrated and had lots of negative comments towards it would hopefully be protected. So I support this move.
Nice.
Okay.
I would echo what AJ said. This sounds like it's right in line with what we're trying to see, is a little bit of dispersion from a really concentrated zone. My only concern, and it's not something to hold it up, but it just with the structural integrity of the building that you're moving into, and it sounds like John Plano's put notes in there that they've got to get some engineering done and they've got to get it up to current code. So with that in there, I'm comfortable approving this, but it does sound like there's quite a bit of work to do. And then to get it up to the standard of being able to control its own smells and ventilation and all that. It just sounds like a big project, but.
Have our work cut out for us.
What's that?
So we have our work cut out for us.
It's mostly, the two Johns and I went in there, and it's mostly cosmetic. The floors we think are in good shape. John refused to go down into the crawl space. But the actual space is just, it's one of the best spaces in town. I mean, we were just kind of blown away by it.
Cool.
I stuck my head down there, the floors.
You did?
I just had a question. Is this the little white building just past 7-Eleven?
Correct.
It used to be like a produce,
Yep.
seasonal produce thing
That's
at
the
one
one.
time. Just different produce.
Well,
You're right.
Agriculture.
Cultivation.
Yeah, just be careful. It sounds like you'll probably want negative pressure, and you got a crawl space, and like you said, you got your work cut out for you to mitigate moisture as well. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion on Sweet Leaf Pioneer change location?
Move to approve the change of location for Sweet Leaf Pioneer Carbondale LLC.
Second.
Motion by Katrina, seconded by Marty. Further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Good luck.
Thanks for doing business in Carbondale, guys.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to short-term rentals. This is a continuation of had in the past. Janet?
I'll let John do this
John?
one. I'm too quiet.
Just with pot. So on June 2nd, the Planning and Zoning discussed the recommendations that were forwarded to them, and they discussed them in depth. And in your packet, you do have the 12 items that they agreed upon that they would like to see short-term rentals actually cover. Those include the definition, permitting, building code requirements, posting of the property, a local representative, and occupancy limits allowable in ADUs. So with that, those 12 items, you can feel free to discuss.
And if I can add something, I think PNC's thought was to handle this right now with a light touch. You know, there were a couple of premises, make sure we look at the regulations we already have in place, such as odor, noise, occupancy, instead of doing new ones, because that's where we ran into problems with the old development code. And so we really looked at the existing laws. And to also just keep a light touch right now and see how it works, and as we go through to find problems, realizing we can always fine tune it as we go forward in the future.
So light touch, but still the conditional use permit would be an added requirement that anybody doing any kind of short-term rental would have to come in and apply. It'd be staff review. Sounds like it would be an inspection on John's part.
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
For all the
So-
life safety items.
maybe a light touch from the applicant, but an impact to staff's time, for sure.
It would be.
Okay. Questions or comments? Trina?
I really appreciate you guys putting this together. I think it's really important that we look at all the impacts of this, including some that this can't directly address. I like the idea of people coming in and just that, again, that level of accountability of people coming in and saying, this is what I want to do. I did just have the idea that it might be nice, actually, if there was outdoor signage. I think in a way that could illuminate for us how many places are actually being converted to this type of use, because there are whole buildings in town. I don't know if that's something other people would support or not, but other commercial business, places being run as commercial businesses, which I think this is, have signage, and so I think that could be an interesting way to demonstrate the impact for us. Again, anecdotally, one of the suppliers, local food producers that I come into the store that I work at, was evicted and displaced, and their rental was turned into a Airbnb within the space of the last meeting that we had. They came in and told me that. So that impact where rental units are being converted to Airbnbs is continuing, and of pretty serious concern to me. But I really like this. I think this is a good first step in it, and may even start to change things just by having, one sort of step of accountability towards this.
Other comments?
I can add a few things. So one thing we talked a lot about, and I see that the P&Z addressed it, but I don't really see where the conclusion is or how it's brought into these recommendations, is trying to be consistent with somebody who's starting a bed and breakfast and somebody who's trying to start an Airbnb or VRBO. Like, somebody had written to us and said it was a really onerous process to start a bed and breakfast, but if I had just called it an Airbnb, I wouldn't have to go through anything. That doesn't seem fair. So can staff bring us up to speed on where, I was expecting that to be part of this recommendation, that somehow either the requirements for being a traditional bed and breakfast are reduced, or that the requirements for being a, web-based bed and breakfast, I don't really know what the other difference is, are altered to be more consistent with those. So do you remember, I see the minutes, I read the minutes, but I couldn't really see through where they ended up with that.
The bed and breakfast is a defined use in the UDC.
Mm-hmm.
It's a year-round business that has its own definition. Bed and breakfast, a residential building containing not more than 5 guest rooms where people can sleep. That's managed and occupied by the owner of the property.
I still don't see why, if I rent out a room and I make the people breakfast, and as long as I don't rent out more than 5 rooms, that makes me a bed and breakfast by that definition, as far as I can tell. But I would go to the Airbnb route, and then I wouldn't have to go through this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other end of that spectrum, you could have similar impacts to a long-term rental, but we don't require anything there.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like we're caught in this gray area. I have to admit, I don't have any answers, because it's a gray area in between those two extremes.
And Jay, I don't know if you have anything to add. We've talked about this. There's a fine line. Put on your planner hat.
I don't want to touch this one. But, it is a tough one on that, as Ben calls out, of where you change from a bed and breakfast to a rental for a room and the occupancy associated with it. The B&B is kind of an easily defined thing, and this was trying to backfill with the P&Z's kind of a soft approach. I have mixed feelings on that. I don't know the solution to it. I wasn't part of the P&Z discussion of how much they zeroed in on it. I think it was more of a focus on, the short-term rental side of things. But I fully understand, if I was running a B&B, I would try to redefine it and not go get a conditional use permit instead of a special use
Yeah.
permit. That's the only difference now under this request.
That would be a good question, Janet. What if someone did come in and it looked like a B&B, smelled like a B&B, and they didn't call it that?
Mm-hmm.
Could they do that?
Yeah,
And will, I'm sure.
and they will, because it's cheaper
Yeah.
and less
It's
processed.
cheaper and easier.
And
You know, I think P and Z did talk about it. It's been a while since we had this conversation. And they look at bed and breakfast as being more of a commercial use. And as we talk along, I can cruise through commercial uses. But they saw a difference in it. But I will ask them. I'll broach it because it is an interesting question.
Well,
What's that gray area? What's the difference between the two?
the reason I ask is we might be making life easier on a B&B developer, if you will, and if we're okay with that, then great. If we don't see any more impact, if someone were to do that, then I don't see any harm in taking this approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think, like you were alluding to, I don't see more impact. It makes me rethink it, but I don't see any more impact from calling a place a B&B than if someone's renting out 5 rooms in their house or in their building. Allison?
I'm talking in a turn because I'm really not up to speed on what the code says are required, but I've always thought when looking at bed and breakfasts, like in the HOA realm, bed and breakfasts are, you could rent all 5 rooms out to 5 different people. So the impacts are much greater, whereas a VRBO rental, classically, I've never seen an Airbnb or VRBO rental be to 5 rooms in a single house to 5 different occupants. So the impacts for a B&B are potentially much more significant. That's why they're thought of classically as a commercial use.
If they do the up to 5 rooms. I think the point is if you just did 1 room and had breakfast, it would still meet the definition. But
Right.
I agree with Allison that it's the overall, 5 parking spots for the 5 visitors.
But maybe that's something we could bring into this definition, is that it's rented out to one party. Sometimes like I've traveled with friends and we'll go in on an Airbnb or a VRBO, but we're still one party. It's one person making the booking, paying the
Right,
person.
5 unrelated
It's not that we don't know the people next door in the same house. And I think that does make sense now that you say it. Like you think about a bed and breakfast, you don't rent the whole house, you rent a room. And that does have a greater impact on the community potentially.
So let's say someone has a house and they want to rent out the house with the kitchen, and then they have another room with a separate entrance. Are we saying they would have to have 2 conditional use permits? So it's not a technical ADU, it just has it's just a room with a separate entrance.
One for the property.
I don't think you can split them up on property. You'd have one set of conditions per, because the enforcement would be against the entire property.
Right. So I'm just saying,
Yeah.
in theory, you might have a situation where you have different renters or multiple renters.
And then maybe you're a bed and breakfast, and maybe you have to go through a bigger process, and that deals with some of these impacts that we're hearing, where there's a lot of units clustered. That way, they wouldn't at least be clustered on the same actual piece of property to different parties coming into town.
You guys think we need more definition with this then? I was gonna say, yeah. Classic attorney response. Yes.
We can work out a definition.
I
Give me
think
5 more
the-
pages and I'll nail it.
To me, I think that they are commercial uses and that we should hold them equally to the same standard. I mean, they're not, I don't think that different. And when I have lived next door to or in the same neighborhood as Airbnbs, there is a different impact to the neighborhood that I see. Number one, it's a vacant house, except for when there's a visitor in it. And number 2, I mean, it says in here that it's supposed to allow the parking, but our housing parking, I mean, I see a parking impact where I see them occurring all over town. So in my view, they are a commercial business equal to bed and breakfast, and that, you know, they should be equalized, whether that means it gets a little bit tougher on Airbnbs and a little bit lighter on bed and breakfast. Like, it's not equitable to me that, like, they just have two different terms that are essentially doing exactly the same thing. You know, I mean, it is a commercial use, and I think that's the thing, is that it is like private residential parts of town that are being used commercially, and that's just because of the way it's developed, it's allowed. But it doesn't feel consistent, I think, with even our zoning, kind of, but that's my take on it.
Jim, do you want to speak on this issue?
Well, if you want, and only if you have questions.
Okay. All right. The other thing that we should point out, that it seemed like there was agreement the last time we discussed this to treat primary resident or owner-occupied short-term rentals differently than non-owner occupied.
Mm-hmm.
But what's being recommended is that we treat them all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Do folks still agree with this, or do we treat them differently? Do we just apply this to the non-owner occupied, or vice versa?
I think, once again, it would be worthwhile to have a cap on the non-owner occupied ones to prevent the conversion of our rental stock to short-term rentals.
Marty?
I still feel that the owner occupied shouldn't be held to as high of a standard. The owner, you know, is on the premises. You know, if there's an issue, whether being unruly or pipe breaks or something, it's their property. They're going to want to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that sense, they're already going to be a higher standard than something that's non-owner occupied.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Katrina on a cap, but I think it's a problematic thing. Where do you set the cap? Do you grandfather those people that are already in? And are you saying that they can't sell it to someone else? There are people already who have homes they're renting out every unit as a B&B. And I don't think you can take that right away from them without causing huge problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you. I don't want to see non-owner occupied where they're renting out 5 bedrooms to 5 different people. Or else they're renting out 5 bedrooms, someone's having a wedding. One side of the wedding, family is coming in, they're saying, we'll take the house for a week. We have 10 people here, no problem. I don't know the answer on that, but I think the owner occupied is a little bit easier, at least for me to swallow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Frosty?
What if we did the non-owner occupied under the bed and breakfast rules? And going forward, that would kind of be a de facto cap, because they'd have to jump through the extra hoops if you
So
set that definition up. That
I'd be
So that would
comfortable
the
with that.
difference, especially, essentially, is a special use permit as opposed to a conditional
Yeah,
use permit.
but the problem is the non-owner occupied wouldn't meet the definition of B&B, because B&B has to be,
Someone there.
you have to have, my coat away, the owner or manager on site.
Oh, you did?
So we'd have to change the definition of B&B.
Yeah.
I like that, though. I mean, it just makes it that much more difficult, and then again brings that accountability that if somebody is going to run a house as a business, that they have to come in and apply for it. I think that's a good solution.
Well, they have to apply for it either way, it's just whether or not there's a public process.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, I didn't think about the definition of the bed and breakfast having a owner on site, because that would, but there's gotta be a way to get there if that would work.
Yeah.
Jay
Or
and I,
similar process. Mm-hmm.
Jay and I had a discussion about it this morning, and I thought it brought up an interesting, I guess, concept that I hadn't thought about. And the special use permit sort of forces the discussion before it happens via the public process, and the conditional use permit allows us to revoke it if there's a problem after the fact. And to me, when I had first read this, I thought, that makes sense, that what I want to me, what I want to be able to do is if there's some extenuating circumstances and things have gone awry, even though we have some prescriptive ways to mitigate impacts, if something goes wrong, we can revoke their conditional use permit. And to me, that was okay. And I was willing to say we would only require that of an owner-occupied, of the non-owner occupied ones. And I don't even feel like it's necessary to require a conditional use permit for the owner occupied ones, because they're small, they fly under the radar screen, and it's not a big deal. But I do think I think the notion of a special use permit does bring up the idea, do we feel it's necessary to have a public discussion before these? To me, I think that's over the top. I think that what we're essentially doing is possibly making it easier for bed and breakfasts, but to require a special use permit for a short-term rental just seems like we would all of a sudden be spending a lot of time on these. And I don't think that's necessary. I think with a conditional use permit, we have what we need for now. And in terms of the cap, I don't necessarily, my sense in just my own amateur research is that the market tends to, in Carbondale, the market's kind of taking care of that, and I think it would be kind of arbitrary. And just as we've talked about marijuana licenses, all of a sudden you're jacking up the price for those that are within that cap, because now we don't have any more competition, so we can jack up our price if there's a cap on short-term rentals. So I'm not ready to go to the cap yet, and nor do I necessarily think that would. I don't think that's the right tool. It wouldn't necessarily free up more affordable housing, in my opinion. But go ahead, Katrina. Then Frost.
I guess I'm just looking for us to address the conversion of rental properties for community members, including town staff and teachers and police and all of us, the conversion of that housing stock to short-term rentals, and none of this does that.
Right.
You're right.
And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that's an interesting idea of making it, if it's reviewed, I mean, that's the thing. If we're reviewing it as to whether it's good, I mean, I think it deserves a review of whether, I keep going back to this fourplex that is all Airbnbs. But because the community impact is obvious. The vibrancy of the neighborhood is affected by the houses that are only used part of the time, and there's no community investment, and I mean that's really my only concern with this. Although maybe not my only concern, because I think it is good that we're addressing the safety and that it's not substandard buildings. I think that's important too. But I mean, to me, this is a real problem. And in my experience of looking for rental houses and searching all different neighborhoods and all different sites within Carbondale and seeing multiple homes that are short-term rentals that, I mean, are inflating the cost of rentals, I mean, if they can get $2,500 to rent to a family, or they can make $5,000 a month having a short-term rental, like that, the short-term rental is driving up the housing market, and from my experience. And so I don't know what the correct mitigation is, and I think there may be some other communities, well, I mean, there are. There's been a whole range of approaches that have controlled this, and I'm not wanting to shut down. I mean, I think this industry, especially in the owner-occupied, is a benefit to people who live in this community, who are struggling to make ends meet, and also it brings people into the community that helps support the vibrancy of our community. But this other issue of these empty rental units being used this way is, I'd really like us to try and get at that somehow.
Well, can I respond to that, Frosty, before I let you go? I agree that there's the potential for short-term rentals to displace affordable housing. But I also know that short-term rentals have enabled folks to afford their housing because it subsidizes their mortgage. So it might be different types of housing, but I'm not convinced. I shouldn't say it that way, but I don't know what the net benefit or impact is. There might be a net benefit to affordable housing with short-term rentals because it helps subsidize housing for locals.
But that's owner occupied though, right? That's not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's owner occupied.
Yeah, I would agree with
I'm in
that.
agreement
Yeah, I think
with
I'm not speaking out of turn.
Oh, go for it.
Are you?
I'm finished.
But I agree with you. I think on owner occupied, I think that's for sure. But I think that what Marty and Katrina and I are trying to get to is the non-owner occupied. And I don't, I think that's a good point you raise about, well, does it make people that have already bought their units, give them a windfall? Maybe so, but at least it stops future windfalls and future loss of affordable housing. So we will agree to disagree on that. Because I do think that we should do something with the owner occupied, and as far as either a de facto cap or de jure cap, I'm fine with that. And I wonder if we could, I agree with you on your time, though. We don't want to spend a bunch of time on this, especially at this level, but maybe there's a way to get it to the staff and let them do it.
I'm glad you raised something up. You're not going to like it.
To me, what I'm hearing is 3 separate issues, and they're almost independent, so we can act on this recommendation and still decide to act on cap if
later,
we want. And same thing with the definition. We can tweak the definition of a short-term rental to create greater differentiation between B and Bs if we want to. So maybe let's just talk about this. Before us is the idea of requiring conditional use permits for all short-term rentals. Do people support that?
I'm reluctant, honestly. I do want to tread lightly here. I totally agree with we would all like to do what we can to reduce the conversion of long-term rentals to short-term rentals. But we also want to allow some of these because they add economic impact and bring people here and let us expand beyond our hotel rooms at Mountain Fair and busy times. So I think we're actually in agreement on those goals. I'm reluctant here, the amount of staff time. I don't know what these inspections are really going to accomplish, other than maybe checking for a smoke and a carbon monoxide detector. They already have to get a sales tax permit, so they already have to come to town on some level. I'm reluctant to put more burden on staff time there. I really am, and thinking about the fiscal impacts of that if we'll be asked to increase staffing to deal with this at some point. So I'm reluctant there. If we do move forward with something like this, I feel like there's one other little category that we might not be thinking about. A lot of people, go away for 4 weeks in the summer and put their house up for rent. And I'm guessing that we wouldn't want to prohibit that sort of thing. Yeah. But that would require those people to come get a conditional use permit and a sales tax license. So I saw when we researched this and read that big report, some towns said you can rent it for 30 days in a year without going through any kind of process. Mm-hmm. If you're going to rent it for more than 30 days a year, then you have to go through this. So it's kind of like this window, if you're renting it for less than 30-day periods, but more than 30 days total, but not a full year. Like, it gets really weird there. But I don't want to accidentally turn people into, where they're violating the code when they go to Mexico and they put their house on Facebook or whatever and say, who wants to stay here for 4 weeks and help me pay for my trip? Like, that's a common thing that I think we shouldn't do away with. So just be concerned about that too.
We could address that in the definition.
Yeah.
So we could put that in the definition box of issues. But I agree. Marty?
Yeah, that was one of the things I thought we pretty much had agreement on. I mean, it was the owner occupied was one thing. The person who's trying to get the tuition money for their kid in college by renting out the extra bedroom. The other example, like you just said, like I retire, my wife and I want to go to Arizona for a month. We'll rent out our house for a month, pay the mortgage, and have an extra grand to pay for the rental in Arizona. I thought those were two areas where we were in agreement. Now, and this is where it gets tricky, because someone brought up a situation. Your parents are sick. You have to go to Florida, Arizona, or California, take care of them for an extended period, 6 months. And what do you do then? You want to rent out your place because you're not working and, there's a problem meeting the mortgage, and you want to rent it out, get enough to cover the mortgage and maybe a little bit more. So I think that gets tricky with the 30-day But I think our intent was, the person wants to rent it once in a year, for whatever reason, with a family emergency or for vacation. We didn't want to make it onerous for them. The owner occupied who wanted to rent out that extra bedroom because the kids moved out of the house and, you know, they could use the extra money. I don't think we want to make it onerous for them. I think having certain standards is good. I think we also have found that not everyone is coming forward voluntarily, that staff has had to go online and find these places and approach the people about complying. So
is there support for not touching owner occupied?
I would support that.
Yeah, I actually would too.
No requirements if it's owner occupied other than what's already required for taxes,
Sales tax license.
sales tax license.
Yeah, that's what I was just getting at. Is it equitable, like for sales tax and?
Well, if they're paying their sales tax license, is what they're saying to include that.
And do we agree that the term owner occupied means primary residence? So even though you may be gone for a year, that's still your primary residence.
Yeah, you're registered to vote here. This is your residence.
And that helps people on vacation or whatever. It's still there where they're
Still have to
registered.
get a sales tax license, technically.
Right, exactly.
If they're going less than 30 days.
Right.
In terms of if they do more than 30 days, it's a long-term rental, they don't need a sales tax license.
Okay.
Okay.
So now we're just talking about owner occupied and whether or not, again, let's put the definition on hold with the differentiation between B and B, but do we support the idea of just a conditional use permit, special use permit, or something else?
I still don't know what this would accomplish. Because it wouldn't accomplish the goal, as you said, of reducing the number of those, unless it's just that people don't want to come deal with it.
To me, it's a mechanism to revoke the license if the impacts are out of control, which we don't have right now.
Okay.
I mean, we already have the regulations in place for noise and parking and all that, but if something goes haywire, we can revoke the license, the permit. Yep, Marty.
Yeah, but same thing. Where do we draw the line there? Okay, I rented it to one group of people, 8 20-something-year-olds who were here for spring break, and they went crazy. So, but that one instance, you're going to revoke the license. The person may have had 10 other tenants, renters, that were perfectly fine.
Yep.
I mean,
Well, I think that's at the discretion of whatever the
board.
hearing process is.
Hearing
when
process
we
is.
get there. I mean, I can talk from personal experience. I've had 2 units on VRBO rentals for 6 and 8 years respectively, and of the one, I've had one bad rental, which ended up with complaints from the neighbors through that period. So hopefully that wouldn't trigger it's an area zone for the use, but to clarify. But that wouldn't, in my mind, it'd be to trigger the board of, hey, here's a complaint. Usually it's going to be on trends. And I think, as I mentioned in past meetings, what we'll see the complaints are most of the time come from as soon as a hot tub gets installed.
Yeah.
That's the threshold of complaints on rentals, because then folks are out at winter after skiing, in a residential neighborhood, and that's when we'll start seeing requests to revoke the conditional use permits if we go this route.
So no hot tubs?
Janet.
Just kidding.
You know, I did talk to the police department to see if they've gotten complaints, and that they really hadn't, no more than other rentals, we all know those neighbors, at least I do in my neighborhood. But I go back to the question that P&Z asked me when we first brought this back to them at your request. They said, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And it caught me dead. And listening to this, it's like, I feel like I'm not sure what the problem is we're trying to solve.
Well, I think there's 2.
Yeah.
One is mitigating significant impacts to neighbors, and the other is the affordable housing issue, or the removal of affordable housing by short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Am I speaking that term? Is that
Yeah,
something?
I've got exactly that, because I was doing the same thing, Janet. I was like, let's get back to exactly what we're trying to solve. And I wrote those 2 things down. And I
Okay.
don't feel like we really have any tools that will address the conversion of short-term rental, or long-term rentals to short-term rentals. And I do, I'm concerned about it, but I don't want to be really heavy-handed on it. And so I think there is a limit to the market for these in town, and I think we're experiencing the testing of that market, because these haven't existed until fairly recently in the history of town, and so now people are trying it out. But at some point, you get to a point where there's not that many people staying here for a week in November or October or whatever, and then they do the math and they'd rather have it rented year round. So I think that I do think it'll take care of itself. I'm not as worried as I would be if we were in some major destination town like Aspen, and I know that we're a destination in our own right, but on that scale where it really could convert 3/4 of your housing to short-term rentals, I just don't think that we're at any risk of that. But I just don't think that we really have any tools in our toolbox to actually directly hit that one.
And it's like Dan said, you can revoke the conditional use permit, at
Yeah.
least you can.
But we can't do it based on the fact that we think there's too many. We'd have to do it based on the fact that they had violated some of the terms.
Marty and then Katrina and then Jim.
Okay. I mean, we're not going to resolve the affordable housing issue with this, not tonight, definitely. But I beg to differ with you, Ben, because I think that because of our proximity to Aspen, and because of what their BRB rentals are going to be charging, say for a week in December or spring break, that we're going to be a very attractive alternative. If they're charging $5,000 for a week, say in Snowmass Village, for a 4-bedroom house, and we're charging $2,000 for a week, I think a lot of people would find that very attractive. So, I mean, that's a concern of mine. Because of our proximity to Aspen, that, I hate to say trickle-down effect, but, their rentals are so outrageous that what to me is outrageous for Carbondale may not be outrageous for 6 kids coming for spring break, or a family coming, for Christmas or New Year's or whatever. Just want to throw that out there.
Katrina.
I think it'd be really interesting just to try putting it in a category that requires a public hearing. And in a public hearing, we can look at all the impacts. And it might be a little touchy, but we could deny something on the basis that its impact is too great. And if the impacts are shown to be too great, then we can pull the license. Both of those things are tricky. Denial and revoking are big hammers to use, But out of all of this, and in the question of what problem we're trying to solve, like Airbnbs, I don't think are a problem. But I think, seeing conversion, and I know of several units that are units that I personally would rent based on their size and cost and everything that are not available to renters anymore. So, if we can, all this, I think really honing in on that, and I think it is a risk to try something. It's also a risk to not do anything and let the trend continue, because even if it does average out, in the meantime, we're literally we're losing community members in real time. And so I just, if we can agree on a step that doesn't feel too onerous to these people, because there are people who are looking to invest in Airbnbs as short-term rentals, as whole buildings in the community. I know someone who had looked at actually building one. So that aspect, and we had talked about that in the previous meeting too, of not really wanting to encourage that kind of that's not really the kind of development we need. Maybe it is. We'd have to really discuss it, but yeah, I just, I would love to just hone in, and I think that is a really interesting idea to expand the definition of bed and breakfast to include not unoccupied buildings used for short-term rentals or something like that.
Jim, and if you would just come to that.
I just want to, my name's Jim New, and I own a not owner-occupied VRBO, short-term rental at 298 North 7th Street, so right on the path where 7th Street hits it. And a lot of talk in the Planning Commission minutes. It's not all exactly the way it is, but my wife and I built that for our own use, but we're not moving to Carbondale yet. We live in Glenwood. And and the intent was to long-term rent it. But when we were building 2 years ago, the town was talking about needing more lodging rooms and kind of the short-term rentals being a solution to that. And that actually gave me the idea. And I was like, oh, good. And then when we're seeing friends in Carbondale, we can stay at the house because it's not always occupied. And I also thought that it was less of an impact on the neighborhood because someone's not always there. There's another long-term rental that we own right next to it. And I thought having two families always there could create more of a problem than having someone just sometimes on the short-term rental property there. And so that was my thinking. I'm very committed to this community and very worried about the long-term rental costs and worker housing and everything. I think having the license process makes a lot of sense. I think going through the public hearing process is fine. It's just more expensive and a lot more time. Conditional use process makes sense too. And I think what's good about it is you know what's out there. They have to come to you. And if Janet lets you know, we just got 10 applications, boom, moratorium, and shut that down. Because what would happen in that situation, Silverton had a big problem. Everyone from Durango went and bought every unit in Silverton. And no one in Silverton has anywhere to live now. And it was just the recreation destination environment in Silverton, the proximity to Durango. And so that never happens here. I don't think it will now because you can make about as much long-term rental as you can doing short-term. And you have to manage the heck out of the short-term. I mean, if I put my wife's time into it, I think we're not doing as well, but that's fine. At some point, the market may say that the short-term rental, because of Aspen or Carbondale on its own right, all of a sudden it's commanding so much more money, boom, you're going to be seeing those conversions and investors, and you don't want that. So I think this license program helps you keep control of that. If you want to put a cap on it too, that's fine, but you'll see it coming. So I totally support all this. You guys need to know what this is. The whole sharing economy is really evolving and bizarre, and governments aren't sure what to do with it. So you guys are talking about all the relevant issues. This is great, and I think getting it on your radar, having the basics, and then see what are the problems. And I think that's about the only way you'll get to the conversion problem is when you see those applications come in, you know something's happening.
Mm-hmm.
The market flipped. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
I think Jim brings up an issue that I still can't reconcile with the special use permit, and that is, to Jim's point, the impacts of a long-term rental can be equally large as short-term rentals, yet we're asking the short-term rental to go through a somewhat onerous special use permit process. And so that's why I personally like to steer clear of a special use permit now. I mean, I think there's also a good point that we could change that, but.
My only, on the fiscal impact, I think this is really good for Carbondale to an extent. It provides, like everyone we rent to has some connection to Carbondale CRMS or something. I mean, and my wife, that's why she likes doing it, because she likes meeting everybody. And it's really cool to give these people a place to stay. I don't know where they would otherwise, and all the economic activity. If you go too far, I can go through it because I know how and capable of it, but you might lose a lot of VRBOs because they don't want to pay for it. And if that's your intent, that's fine, but that's a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Conditional use permit process is pretty easy. So I guess that's something to consider. There may be an economic impact if you make the process too hard. You may lose those VRBO inventory or short-term rental. And I totally agree with your owner-occupied difference too.
Thank you.
Sorry, I won't get up again.
You can.
Okay, so.
Can I ask a question of definitional question, but it pertains to this? So when we're talking about owner-occupied versus non-owner-occupied, do we consider it owner-occupied if the owner lives in the main house and there's an ADU on the property that they rent out as VRBO or Airbnb or whatever? Is that owner-occupied?
To me it is.
Or what if the owner lives in the ADU and rents out a
Right,
big
sure.
house?
So either way, the owner
Those are
lives on
on
the
site.
property. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Because those are also removing small units from our rental pool potentially.
Yep, Janet.
We did get some definitions. I can't think of his name, your neighbor. He did have some definitions. It had different definitions on owner.
Type 1, type 2.
Yeah, type 1, type 2. And we could kind of take a look at those. Because I kind of agreed, because I've been watching Denver for quite a while, and they treated owner-occupied differently than non-owner-occupied. P&Z didn't want to go there. But I can go back and pull those definitions, take a look at that, and see if we can fix that.
I
You know,
think just to respond, I think the third definition just had to do with duration. But I can't remember if it was owner or non-owner occupied.
Okay, I'll take a look. You know what I'm talking about, the different tiers? Okay. And then the public hearings, that concerns me because of the staff time. Conditional use permits, just a staff level review. If you're talking about special use permits, it would be an immense load on staff because there's different things. You have to get public notices written, coach people on how to do the mailing, get the signs written up, writing a staff report, bringing it to P&Z, because it would just be a P&Z staff level review. So I have a lot of hesitance on public hearings. My 2 cents.
And what we would get if we required a conditional use permit for non-owner occupied, we would have a little bit of warning. How many are we talking? 1, 2, and if there's a plethora of applications, we can act immediately. Is my thought.
So taking basically this, what is prepared here and applying it only to units that are not owner occupied.
Correct.
That seems reasonable. I mean, I think that's true. Then we would get a heads up if there's a huge wave of them all of a sudden, or at least have a much more accurate count, because we would have a license count. And we would be able to have a count of how many there are in that unique category. I was going to ask that question, if there's any distinction, or if we're able to distinguish whether or not the owner lives in the VRBO. Yeah.
Anybody not agree with that idea? Apply P&Z's recommendations to non-owner occupied short-term rentals. Okay. Do we feel like we need to tweak the definition of short-term rental to further differentiate it from B&Bs?
I can do that if you'd like, if you don't feel like tangling, because it's been sorted through with other communities, so I can go back to some of those templates, if you want, unless you want to do it.
What seemed to me, though, as far as a road to follow, is what Allison suggested about that. It seems that a traditional bed and breakfast, you're thinking of it more like a small hotel, where it's rented to multiple different parties. Whereas a short-term rental, we're thinking of rented to one party. And however you want to divide up that party, if it's a family or friends or whatever, but you're not advertising separate rooms for rent to separate parties in the same unit. I think that's the core. Does that make sense? So maybe get some good language on it from somewhere else, but.
I just can't think through, does that mean they just have to get 2 applications or 2 permits, or is it just, or do they have to become a B&B?
If they rent.
Yeah, if there's say
It'd be
2.
a B&B.
Then I guess they're a B&B.
Yeah.
Okay.
They do multiple parties.
Okay.
I mean, that seems,
Be the
if our
concept
goals
of it.
are reducing the impact on neighbors, that's one, that would help, right? Because it's a bigger process to really kind of jam tons of people in there and make it like a little hotel.
And the other thing is, I'm sorry, I keep jumping in.
That's okay.
If you're B&B, you have parking restrictions. You need 2 parking spaces to start for your owner occupied, and then you need 1 per bedroom. So if you go the short-term rental route, then you don't have to meet the parking requirements. So that feels really tangled to me. I'm not sure how to deal with that.
So Janet, are you okay with just direction tonight? Since
Yeah.
this would have to come back?
Yep.
Okay, so sounds like we have agreement that we're not going to change or add any requirements to owner-occupied short-term rentals. We're going to follow through with P&Z's recommendations on requiring a conditional use permit on non-owner occupied short-term rentals. And as part of that, Janet will bring back language that differentiates short-term rentals from B&Bs. Yes.
How do you want me to do this? Do you want me to, instead, so we don't spend a lot of time on it, do you want me to bring it back to P&Z, as a quick discussion item? Have them work through it? What we would need to do is have public hearings to plug this into the UDC.
I don't know how the rest of you feel. I feel, I'm a firm believer of getting P&Z's blessing, but I feel like they've given us their recommendation and we're tweaking it, so I don't feel like it needs to go back.
So I would draft an ordinance.
Okay.
Bring it to P and Z in ordinance form as it's required to amend the UDC and do that as a hearing all in one
Yeah,
swoop.
so
and
we
then
don't
bring it here as a
spend
hearing.
a ton
So,
of time
Perfect.
on it.
yeah.
I'd rather just get it done.
Okay.
And to make sure, what's really important to me is, now we have the new UDC, is, if we need Clarion I got Clarion's advice on the definition, but, how we have uses now, and then we have certain standards for every use, is to make sure we follow that same template for this.
Yeah. So
I just want to be really sure.
Yeah, we'll work on making sure it follows the UDC format and
Great.
and style. So it'll take a little bit to put together, and then, I hate to say it, but this is gonna be kind of like pot, where in 6 months, we're gonna be looking at the next revision to it. So let's keep it simple out the gate, and then look at the next revision down the line, or else we'll just be having the same discussion.
Okay.
Thanks, Jay.
Good.
Any other comments or thoughts on that? Mark?
Not on that, I just would make a comment. I want to thank Allison for her help with the marijuana stuff, because I don't know if we'll see you at the next meeting or not. So hopefully we don't, and everything goes well, and thank you for your help.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Good luck with all that.
With all that.
Okay, Jay, anything else on boards and commission minutes or anything else you want to report?
Not at this time.
Okay. Your motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right.
He
That was
just
pretty
raised to
good.
the roof on adjourning.
Do we have a work session next week?
So Janet,
Yes.
To amend the UDC, it requires a
Let
public
me look
hearing
at
in
what's
front of
on
the,
the agenda.
P&Z.
do they come back
And then it
here?
comes
Yeah, it
back
goes
here
P&Z.
afterwards.
So
Yeah.
many meetings.
So next
It's
week's
legislation goes to both.
Hey, Frosty, just
We
so
can't
you
have-
know,
the board
next
can't
week
have
we're
that.
talking Northwest COG,
Oh, by
and then we
Frosty.
begin budget discussions, and Jay will have revenue projections for us.
Ooh.
And that's, we also put time on that agenda to talk about broad board priorities as part of the budget process. For the most part, it's the budget.
Is John still
So it begins.
John,
Kind of a
No.
big deal.
can I leave this with you?
Allocations, I
for-
think,
He was gonna
it's not
take
the
it.
most
Try to get
important
my
thing we do,
email straightened out
but
finally.
it kind of is what becomes real in the community. I think all the way up. I mean, an act of Congress is a budget,
Here it is.
you know? That's what they are. That's us.